Summer in Malta is supposed to feel safe. Its beaches packed with tourists. It's the kind of place where tragedy feels impossible. On the morning of July 18th, a 17-year-old German boy named Mike Mansholt walked out of his hotel carrying a backpack, a mountain bike, and excitement. 4 days later, his family stood waiting at the airport in Germany. Mike was supposed to be on that flight, but he never arrived. 8 days later, he was found barefoot at the foot of a towering cliff, his backpack missing, his important belongings nowhere to be found. What began as a routine missing person case quickly twisted into something darker. Timelines shifted. Evidence contradicted official statements. The most disturbing detail of all, when Mike's body was returned to Germany, forensic examiners made a horrifying discovery. Almost all of his internal organs were gone. No explanation. The ensuing investigation, involving 2 countries. Unanswered questions. This is the case of Mike Mansholt. Mike Mansholt was born on August 20, 1998, in Oldenburg, a German city with a population of over 160,000. He was the son of Bernd Alexander Mansholt and Susanne Mansholt, a financially stable family that allowed him a very comfortable childhood. Mike was described as an active, adventure-loving boy. When he was young, his parents decided to divorce. After the separation, Mike lived with his mother. Later, she began a new relationship and had a daughter named Maria. Mike's father also found a new partner and had a son named Daniel. Mike reportedly got along very well with both Maria and Daniel. He had always wished for siblings so he wouldn't feel alone. Mike developed a passion for traveling at an early age. He inherited this from his father, who took him on trips to places such as Iceland, Scotland, and the Caribbean. They even crossed the Atlantic Ocean together on a sailboat, a journey lasting more than 70 days that became an unforgettable memory for them. His father always described Mike as a polite, kind young, and mature. In July 2016, Mike decided to take a trip to Malta. It was his first time traveling alone, without his parents, siblings, or friends. He went there to visit his girlfriend, who was attending a language course on the island. Since he was on vacation, he wanted to spend some time with her. For context, Malta is an archipelago in the Mediterranean Sea, located about 58 miles south of Sicily, Italy. The country has roughly 500,000 residents and covers about 122 square miles. It is a popular tourist destination known for its beautiful beaches. Summer is its peak season, with temperatures often reaching around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, making the beaches crowded. Crime rates in Malta are considered low. The country is also known for being a tax haven. Some might think it unusual for Mike's parents to let him travel alone at just 17 years old. But according to his family, he had already visited many parts of the world and had gained significant travel experience. He was responsible, resourceful, capable of handling situations most teenagers couldn't. Mike arrived in Malta on July 8, 2016, landing in Valletta, the capital, where he met up with his girlfriend. They spent the next several days enjoying the island and exploring different locations. However, as the date approached for their return to Germany, Mike decided he wanted to stay a few extra days. His girlfriend flew back alone, and he informed his parents that he planned to remain in Malta to explore more of the island. His mother, Susanne, was at home in Germany, while his father, Bernd, was on vacation with family in Croatia. Neither parent objected to Mike's decision to extend his trip, so they agreed to let him stay. Mike checked into a hotel in Sliema, a city located on Malta's northeast coast in the Northern Harbor District. Sliema is a major residential and commercial area, filled with shops, bars, restaurants, and cafes. It is also the most densely populated city on the island. The hotel where he stayed was called the Astra, Security camera footage from the hotel shows Mike leaving his room 105, at around 8:39 a.m. On the morning of July 18th, at 9:10 a.m., he approached the reception desk to ask for some information and had a short conversation with the staff. Afterward, he returned to his room and stayed there for almost an hour. He left again at around 9:55 a.m. In the footage, Mike can be seen wearing a blue t-shirt, carrying a black backpack over his shoulder, holding his phone. Inside his backpack, he had packed a GoPro camera, a portable charger, his documents, a credit card, and cash. The weather was hot and sunny, perfect for exploring. After leaving the hotel, Mike walked to a nearby port where he rented a mountain bike, a blue and black Lombardo, to use for the day. At 10:11 a.m., Mike sent a voice message to his father on WhatsApp. In it, he said he had rented a bike and planned to cycle around Malta. He mentioned that some roads were very steep, so he would have to get off and push the bike in certain areas. He also told his father he would send a picture soon, but he never did. That voice message was the last time Bernd ever heard from his son. Although Mike didn't get in touch with his family afterward, they didn't immediately suspect anything was wrong. They assumed he was simply busy exploring Malta. On July 22nd, Susanne and Maria went to the airport to wait for him. Mike was supposed to land in Germany that day, but he never appeared. At first, they thought he might have arrived in Frankfurt, where he had a scheduled layover. Susanne tried calling his phone, but it was switched off. She tried several more times, each attempt ending the same way. Concern growing, she contacted the airline in charge of Mike's flight. That's when she learned Mike never boarded the plane. Shocked and terrified, Susanne went straight to the police and reported her son missing at around 2:00 a.m. On July 23rd, the German authorities treated the situation as urgent and immediately contacted the Maltese police. One of the German detectives learned that Maltese officers had already been searching for Mike for at least 2 days. Mike had not been seen since the morning of July 18th. When he left his hotel and rented a mountain bike, he was supposed to return the following day, but never did. It was actually the manager of the Astra Hotel who first alerted Maltese authorities on July 20th, reporting that Mike had not come back to pick up his belongings or check out. The Maltese police were already searching the surrounding areas. Meanwhile, no one from Malta had contacted Mike's family in Germany. Some sources suggest that the police didn't have his family's contact information. Others claim it was an oversight. When Mike's father received the news, he immediately interrupted his vacation and took the earliest flight to Malta with Mike's younger brother, Daniel. Despite the panic, Bernd tried to stay rational. He considered every possible explanation. Maybe Mike had missed his flight. Maybe his phone battery died. Maybe the phone had been stolen. The family clung to hope, believing that Mike could turn up at any moment. Once in Malta, Bernd stayed in constant contact with investigators and participated actively in the search. The police checked the entire Maltese archipelago, verifying whether Mike had taken a ferry or boarded a small aircraft. Thousands of missing person flyers were distributed throughout tourist areas, and officers followed up on every lead. On July 24th, Interpol officially joined the case, expanding the investigation internationally as Germany and Malta worked together to find the missing teenager. On July 26th, 8 days after Mike vanished, the Maltese police received an anonymous phone call. The caller claimed to have seen Mike near the cliffs on the island's western coast. These cliffs, known as the Dingley Cliffs, reach nearly 250 meters in height. Search teams and K-9 units headed to the area immediately. After hours of combing the rugged terrain, the dogs picked up a scent. A few minutes later, Mike was found. He is dead. His body was discovered at the bottom of the cliffs, partially hidden beneath dense bushes and rock overhangs. The location was extremely difficult to access and invisible from above, which explained why no tourist had noticed anything unusual. The mountain bike Mike had rented was located about 30 meters above his body, dangling precariously from the rocks. It was badly damaged. The handlebars were twisted. The tire was completely flat. Investigators removed Mike's remains and transported them for autopsy, while also collecting the scattered personal items found nearby. Mike's sneakers, sunglasses were discovered close to his body. Strangely, he was barefoot. Even more unsettling, the black backpack he had carried from the hotel, containing his phone, laptop, GoPro, money, documents, was missing. Another unusual detail caught investigators' attention. Fresh hay was found near the body. It looked recently trampled, as if it had detached from the sole of someone's shoe. But it could not have come from Mike, since his shoes were lying several meters away, and he was barefoot when found. This raised disturbing questions about whether someone else had been at the scene shortly before the body was discovered. Bernd was devastated after learning the fate of his son, but he tried to remain strong in hopes of uncovering what had truly happened. For Daniel, Mike's younger brother, the loss was crushing. The two had been extremely close and had dreamed of traveling the world together as adults, dreams that would never come true. When Susanne, Mike's mother, was informed of his death, she struggled to process the news. It was something she had never imagined could happen. Maria, too, was heartbroken. She had grown up with Mike and couldn't accept that she would never see him again. Mike's girlfriend, who had already returned to Germany a few days earlier, was also deeply shaken. She had spent so much time with him during their trip and couldn't wait for him to return home so they could see each other again. One of Bernd's first actions upon arriving in Malta was to visit the Astra Hotel, specifically room 105, where Mike had stayed. By then, the room had already been cleaned out by staff, and Mike's belongings were returned to Bernd, but the GoPro case was not among them. This suggested that Mike had likely taken the case with him, and the camera was probably inside the case attached to Mike's belt. News of the case caused an uproar in Malta, where such tragedies were extremely rare, and it drew significant attention in Germany as well. When authorities recovered Mike's body, Maltese police cataloged and collected only 3 of his belongings found nearby: his sneakers, his sunglasses, and the GoPro case he had been carrying. This case was attached to Mike's belt, but it remained unclear whether he had the camera with him or if the case was empty, as it mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. Meanwhile, Bernd understood exactly how important that GoPro was. Mike filmed everything he experienced, and whatever was recorded that day could reveal precisely what happened. But the day after the body and items were recovered, every officer involved in the investigation suddenly denied ever seeing a GoPro case attached to Mike's belt. They insisted that no such item had been logged or collected. Bernd found this hard to believe, especially since the lead investigator herself had mentioned seeing the case on the belt. That same day, Maltese authorities announced their conclusion: Mike had died in an accident. They stated that he had fallen from the cliff while riding his bike. However, the condition and final position of Mike's body made this explanation difficult to believe. If he had simply fallen forward while cycling, his body would have been found directly beneath the point of impact. Instead, its location suggested that he had fallen backward, which would be extremely unlikely in a natural fall from a bike. Despite these inconsistencies, police declared the death an accident, claiming Mike had fallen more than 30 meters and then rolled down to the spot where his body ultimately came to rest. The coroner responsible for examining Mike's body told Bernd that Mike had broken his neck in 2 places during the fall, resulting in an almost instantaneous death. However, at that time, no X-rays had been taken, leaving Bernd unsure whether the coroner could actually have come to such a conclusion after examining the body, or whether the testimony was completely fabricated. The autopsy report was finalized about a month later. According to the report, Mike had been dead for approximately 8 days when he was found, indicating that he died the same day he left the hotel to explore the island by bike. But the most alarming finding was this: The autopsy stated that Mike had no broken bones whatsoever. This was extraordinarily unusual for someone who supposedly fell more than 30 meters onto rocks at the base of a cliff. At the very least, a broken arm, leg, or rib would have been expected. This detail directly contradicted the coroner's earlier claim that Mike's neck had been fractured in 2 places and that he had died instantly. Since the autopsy proved there were no fractures at all, the coroner's initial statement was undeniably false. A forensic examination of the mountain bike Mike had rented also raised doubts. Experts concluded that the bike's damage did not match what one would expect from a violent plunge of nearly 100 feet. It was badly bent, but not in a way consistent with such a long, uncontrolled fall. Shortly before the official autopsy report was released to the family, an employee from the Maltese morgue who had handled Mike's body privately approached Bernd. She told him that something was very strange. She hinted that Bernd should consider how to proceed, because it seemed clear that the authorities had no intention of investigating the matter further. Troubled by this, Bernd went again to speak with the lead investigator, the same one who initially claimed to have seen the GoPro case attached to Mike's belt, only to deny it later. This time, she refused to answer any of his questions, avoided eye contact, and walked away. Leaving Bernd even more suspicious, he continued to press the authorities for the truth about the missing GoPro. A few days later, the Maltese forensic department handed him a camera, insisting it was Mike's. But the device they gave him was a cheap, outdated Canon point-and-shoot from the early 2000s. Nothing like Mike's GoPro Hero 2. Along with it came a memory card that had been completely destroyed. Officials claimed it had been found inside the camera beside Mike's body. Bernd immediately knew the camera wasn't his son's and believed the authorities were attempting to distract him so he would stop asking about the real GoPro. By this stage, the Mansholt family had become deeply suspicious of the Maltese police and their apparent disinterest in uncovering what had really happened. It increasingly seemed as though something was being concealed. When Bernd asked the officers who might have taken his son's belongings, several responded that no Maltese person would steal items from a body, implying a tourist might have been responsible. Police also claimed they had tried to retrieve location data from Mike's phone provider but found absolutely nothing. No records at all, which only added to the family's frustration. Feeling stonewalled by the Maltese authorities, Bernd was ready to make formal accusations. But before doing so, he had to return to Germany to prepare for his son's funeral and address urgent family matters. Mike's body arrived in Germany on August 17, 2016, and it was then that new, disturbing discoveries emerged. The funeral home staff preparing his body immediately noticed something was wrong. Mike's remains seemed almost deflated, as though the internal organs were missing. They also discovered that the body had not been embalmed, even though the investigation was still active and the corpse was being transported internationally. Because of this, the German medical team was unable to conduct a full second autopsy. The body smelled strongly of decomposition rather than formaldehyde or any preservation chemicals. The funeral home reported these irregularities to the German authorities at once. A police officer informed the staff that even the airport personnel who handled the coffin upon arrival in Germany remarked that it felt unusually light, far lighter than a coffin containing the intact body of an 18-year-old young man should. Because of the mounting suspicions, Mike's body was transferred to the Medical University of Hanover for a full forensic re-examination. There, specialists made a shocking discovery. The body weighed only 35 pounds. When they opened it, they found that almost every internal organ had been removed. The brain, heart, lungs, liver, pancreas, adrenal glands, right kidney, bladder, prostate, stomach, intestines, and most other organs were gone. Only small fragments of the left kidney, diaphragm, spleen, and part of the colon remained. This explained why the corpse was so deflated and weighed barely 35 pounds. In standard forensic procedure, removing organs during an autopsy is normal. But autopsies include strict protocols. The body is either refilled with sawdust or cotton, or the organs are placed back afterward. And if organs are kept for further analysis, a formal report must explain why. None of those steps were followed in Malta. Mike's body was simply left empty. The Mansholt family was stunned when they learned nearly all of Mike's organs were missing. Bernd even wrote to the Maltese authorities, begging them to return his son's organs so he could bury them properly. A Maltese coroner responded, claiming that animals had eaten the organs before the body was found, an explanation that made no sense. The original Maltese autopsy showed no bite marks, no tearing, and no animal-induced injuries anywhere on Mike's body. Because of these inconsistencies, the public prosecutor's office in Oldenburg, the family's hometown in Germany, intervened and ordered Mike's body to be seized for investigation. What had started as a missing person case turned into a possible criminal matter. German authorities opened a formal inquiry into the death of Mike Mansholt. Forensic experts in Hanover requested the official Maltese autopsy report to compare findings, but they never received it. Later, Mike's parents filed a formal complaint against Maltese officials through their attorneys. Bernd and Susanne decided to take the case to court, demanding an investigation into how the organs disappeared. German prosecutors began reviewing the case and openly questioned whether Mike had actually died in an accident. They also concluded that the Maltese forensic work had been extremely poor. A new autopsy was ordered in Germany, even though the body's condition had deteriorated significantly, making the assessment less reliable. This time, Maltese coroners were required to attend to ensure legal transparency. The results were telling. There were no significant bite marks, and no evidence of rodent activity except for a small, superficial bite on the neck and a minor abrasion on one forearm. They reconfirmed that the body had been intact when taken from the base of the cliffs to the Maltese morgue, with no wounds or marks consistent with scavenging animals. Most importantly, the second autopsy confirmed that the body had not been embalmed in Malta. As a result, decomposition was so advanced that determining the exact cause of death was now impossible. Proper embalming would have preserved critical forensic clues, but since it had not been done, whatever evidence might have existed was lost forever. German experts reached another major conclusion. There was no forensic indication that Mike died from a 30-meter fall. They found no broken bones, no fractured ribs, no damage to the spine, and no significant soft tissue trauma. Mike's skin showed no major wounds or lacerations. Internal bleeding couldn't be ruled out or confirmed because there were no organs to investigate. However, the German authorities considered this possibility unlikely, as internal bleeding would typically be accompanied by bruising or external damage, which was absent on Mike's body. Due to these inconsistencies, the possibility of murder was never definitively ruled out, even though the German authorities could not reach a formal conclusion. The Maltese authorities, however, continued to stand firmly by their position. The first autopsy, carried out in Malta at the start of the investigation, was performed by a team of 3 specialists, including the country's chief forensic pathologist, Professor Mario Seri, a highly respected figure who had received multiple awards for his work. Dr. Seri was present at the recovery site and later performed the autopsy. Yet when Bernd Mansholt and multiple journalists later asked him for clarification, he refused to provide further details. In the only email he ever sent Bernd, he claimed that Mike's organs had already been missing when the body arrived at the morgue, stating they had been eaten by rodents and that the brain had dissolved in the sun. He added that he had already informed the Maltese lead investigator of these details. The German forensic team strongly rejected these statements. In November 2017, Bernd returned to Malta. He attempted to speak with the officers and detectives involved in the case, but all refused to talk. When he filed a legal request to access the entire investigation file, he was informed that the judge handling the case was ill, that she was already known for taking a long time to approve judicial requests. Bernd ultimately obtained access only because a German diplomat intervened on his behalf. Even then, the file he received was incomplete. Several key documents, including the full autopsy report and the original crime scene photographs, were missing. In January 2018, under sustained diplomatic pressure from Germany, the Maltese government reluctantly agreed to reopen Mike's case. It was the first major breakthrough since his death. However, the newly appointed Maltese judge later concluded, again, that Mike had died from falling off a cliff, leaving the case effectively unchanged. German investigators, meanwhile, concluded that the case was riddled with contradictions, but with so much evidence missing, including the organs necessary for determining the true cause of death, they reached a point where no further progress could be made. Diplomats, forensic specialists, journalists, and even members of parliament who examined the case all expressed doubts about Malta's official narrative. Over time, Bernd Mansholt became exhausted, disheartened by the constant roadblocks and lack of cooperation. He eventually stopped pushing for additional inquiries and chose instead to focus on his family. He believes that the truth about what happened to his son may never be known. A German newspaper that had followed the case from the beginning attempted to publish an updated investigation, but when they contacted Maltese authorities, every official refused to comment. It was as if no one who worked on Mike's case wanted to speak about it, almost as if the entire matter was being buried. This case remains full of unanswered questions and unsettling possibilities. Was Mike the victim of a tragic accident or a crime that was never properly investigated? Today, we present a truly shocking and devastating case, one that will evoke feelings of outrage and leave you unable to look away. This is the kind of tragedy that forces us to ask, how far can obsession, jealousy, and the hunger for fame drive a person into darkness? This is no ordinary crime. It is a tale of toxic control, social media stardom turned rotten, and two innocent lives stolen in cold blood by the very man who should have offered love, protection, and safety. At the center of this case stands Ali Abu Laban, better known to nearly 1 million TikTok followers as Jin Kid. To the world, he was a rising star, but behind the screen, he was a man consumed by paranoia, addiction, and an obsession so dangerous that it ended in murder. His estranged wife, Anna Abu Laban, and her friend, Rayburn Barron, paid the ultimate price. Stay with us until the end of this video, as we piece together the life of Ali Abu Laban, from his troubled childhood, to his rise on social media, and finally, to the chilling day when jealousy and rage erupted into cold-blooded murder. This is not just another true crime story. This is a harrowing descent into obsession, betrayal, and fame gone fatally wrong. A story you will never forget. Ali Abu Laban was born in 1992 on Staten Island to a Middle Eastern family and grew up in an abusive household. He has shared that his father was both physically and emotionally abusive, using extension cords to beat him and frequently telling him that he was a disappointment. This trauma led to social anxiety and a strong need for validation from others. In 2013, at the age of 21, Ali joined the U.S. Air Force in search of direction in his life. He was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, where he met Anna, a woman who would significantly impact his life. Anna, born in 1993 in the Philippines, had moved to Japan with her stepfather, a Navy contractor. They first crossed paths when Ali was working as a gate guard and saw Anna arrive at the base with another serviceman. He was immediately taken by her confidence and magnetism, feeling that she embodied everything he wished he could be. They began a nightly Skype routine, and their relationship quickly developed. However, there was a hurdle. Anna was already married to another serviceman, Shah Torres. This news devastated Ali, as he often felt that just as they were growing closer, new challenges would arise. Despite the complications, Ali and Anna's bond deepened. However, things turned sour when Ali got into a physical fight with one of Anna's friends. which led to his discharge from the military in 2015. He returned to Virginia while Anna went back to the Philippines. Their lives took another unexpected turn when Anna discovered she was pregnant with Ali's child. Ali made it his mission to support her and their baby, working multiple jobs to save for her visa, which would allow her to come to the United States when their daughter Amira was born. Ali went to the Philippines. After 9 months, Anna's visa was approved, and she and baby Amira joined Ali in Virginia, initially living with his parents before getting their own place. Ali describes their time in Virginia as perfect. They bought a townhome, both found jobs at the same information technology company, and Ali pursued his dream of becoming a social media star. Anna supported his ambitions by helping with his video production and even doing his makeup for skits. They married on January 27, 2017, and to outsiders, their life seemed idyllic. By 2019, Ali was gaining popularity on social media, posting under the handle Jin Kid on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. His content featured celebrity impersonations, particularly a popular impersonation of Tony Montana from Scarface. Anna often appeared in these videos, either assisting with production or joining him on screen. However, this portrayal masked deeper issues in their relationship. Behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Ali became increasingly jealous and controlling, frequently accusing Anna of infidelity. He often insisted that she leave work early to soothe his unfounded fears. Family and friends became concerned as they noticed Anna with unexplained bruises and overheard loud arguments. Despite the escalating situation, Anna assured her family that things would improve and that Ali had promised to change. Tragically, this is a common pattern in domestic violence. Victims often defend their abusers, clinging to the hope that their situation will get better. In February 2021, Anna persuaded Ali to move to San Diego for his career. She had friends there and loved the city's lifestyle and opportunities. They moved into a luxury apartment on the 35th floor of the Spire San Diego complex in the East Village neighborhood. However, the move marked the beginning of their relationship's deterioration. Both Ali and Anna started partying more, leading to Ali developing a severe cocaine addiction. His cousin, Louis Marinari, later reported that Ali openly used large amounts of cocaine in public places like restaurants and movie theaters. This cocaine abuse caused Ali to become paranoid and increasingly controlling, especially toward Anna and their friend, Rayburn Cardenas Barron, a 29-year-old man who had complimented Anna on her beauty. These compliments fueled Ali's jealousy, which gradually became a dangerous obsession. As Ali's behavior became increasingly erratic and abusive, Anna began to build her independence in San Diego. She made new friends, grew her social media presence, and envisioned a life beyond her toxic marriage, further aggravating Ali's jealousy and desire for control. Disturbingly, Ali began live streaming their arguments on social media, verbally abusing Anna in front of thousands of viewers. These broadcasts turned their private disputes into public spectacles of Ali's mistreatment. Anna frequently called the police, but the lack of visible injuries often prevented officers from intervening. Everything changed in early October 2021, when Anna learned from another woman that Ali had been unfaithful. This revelation shattered Anna's remaining trust in their marriage. For years, Ali had accused her of cheating and monitored her closely, but she eventually discovered that he was the one who was unfaithful. In a moment of frustration, Anna posted a TikTok video revealing Ali's infidelity. The video damaged Ali's carefully crafted online image, and it made him very angry. He demanded she remove it, which she eventually did, but not before it had already been seen by many. Ali blamed Anna for the damage to his reputation. By October 6, 2021, Anna had reached her breaking point. She moved out of their apartment and stayed with a friend, taking their 5-year-old daughter, Amira, with her. She was ready to escape the abuse and start anew. Unwilling to let go, Ali called her, offering to let her stay in the apartment while he would be at a hotel. This seemed like a reasonable compromise. Anna thought she could have the space she needed while they figured out their separation. However, Ali had secretly made a copy of their apartment key. His offer was not genuine but part of a sinister plan. On the morning of October 21, 2021, Anna dropped Amira off at school and returned to the apartment to settle back in, unaware that Ali had already entered using his copied key around 9 a.m. Security footage shows Ali arriving with luggage and spending time in the apartment. He vandalized the space by throwing a pumpkin and flowers on the floor. Most alarmingly, he installed a listening app on Amira's iPad, plugged it in, and concealed it behind the bed in the master bedroom. This was not a spontaneous act of anger, but a calculated attempt to monitor and spy on Anna, eavesdropping on everything that was going on in the apartment in real time. When Anna returned at around 11 a.m. and saw the messy state of the apartment, she felt shocked and upset. She called her friend Julia to let her know that she planned to clean everything up before Amira came home. Anna also said she intended to get a restraining order against Ali. Realizing she would need help, Anna reached out to her friend Rayburn, who agreed to come over and assist. At the same time, she asked Julia to pick up Amira from school so she could focus on cleaning. Meanwhile, Ali is at the hotel, eavesdropping through an app he installed on Amira's iPad. When he heard Rayburn's voice in the apartment, his paranoia and jealousy peaked, confirming his suspicions about Anna and Rayburn. What happened next shows Ali's premeditated intentions instead of rushing over in a blind rage. He used cocaine, later admitting it was the most he had ever taken. He armed himself with a loaded gun. Ali then drove to the Spire apartment complex. Security footage from the building and a neighbor's camera recorded his arrival around 2:50 p.m. The video shows him taking the elevator to the 35th floor. Once the elevator doors opened, he sprinted down the hallway toward the apartment. This was not someone there to talk. He was intent on a deadly confrontation, using a copied key. He entered the apartment and found exactly what he expected. Anna and Rayburn were sitting on the couch with cleaning supplies nearby, trying to address the mess he had created earlier. Audio recordings and witness statements indicate that the next sequence of events was quick and brutal. Within seconds of entering, Ali opened fire. Gunshots were captured about 1 second after he entered the apartment. With no conversation or argument beforehand, Rayburn was shot 3 times in the head and neck at close range. And then Ali turned the gun on Anna, shooting her in the head. Both were killed execution style while sitting defenseless. The situation worsened during his trial, where Ali detailed how calculated his actions were, mentioning that his gun jammed or needed reloading between shots. Instead of stopping, he continued the attack, showing that this was not a crime of passion but cold-blooded murder. After killing Anna and Rayburn, Ali calmly left the building. Security footage recorded him exiting without any visible distress. His first call was not to report the crime, but to his mother, confessing that he had shot and killed Anna. The recorded call, later played in court, was brief and devoid of remorse. He then picked up his daughter Amira from school, informed Yulia, who was assigned to pick Amira up, that plans had changed, and took Amira away just minutes after killing Anna. Around this time, neighbors heard the gunfire and called 911. When police responded, they found Anna and Rayburn's bodies on the couch, both dead from multiple gunshot wounds. It was a tragic scene of 2 young people who had been helping tidy up, now victims of Ali's jealousy and rage. Meanwhile, Ali was driving on Interstate 15 with Amira when police spotted him and pulled him over. They discovered a loaded gun with 9mm ammunition in the vehicle, the same type of bullets used to kill Anna and Rayburn. Ali was caught on the spot while Amira was safely taken out of the car and was protected. The investigation moved quickly, with compelling evidence against him. Security footage clearly showed Ali entering and leaving the building, and audio recordings captured both the murders and his confession to his mother. Confirming his guilt, Ali faced 2 counts of first-degree murder, firearm enhancements, and special circumstances for committing multiple murders. which could result in the death penalty or life in prison without parole if convicted. Initially, Ali attempted to claim innocence. In a jailhouse interview, Ali denied confessing to the murders and could not explain why prosecutors claimed he did. He tried to present himself as a loving husband and father facing wrongful accusations. Ali expressed missing his family and his videos, which he described as everything he valued, and his baby. He spoke about his ambitions to become an actor, claiming he was close to getting a talent agent shortly before the murders. However, his story kept changing, raising concerns among those who interacted with him. Ali's cousin, Louis Marinari, recalled an incident just 3 days before the murders when he displayed a large bag of cocaine and boasted that he could do whatever he wanted without consequence. This revealed the sense of entitlement and narcissism he developed alongside his social media fame. The trial began in May 2024, with Deputy District Attorney Taryn Brast arguing that Ali was a controlling husband who killed Anna because she wanted to leave him. She informed the jury that Ali was so possessive of Anna that if he couldn't have her, no one could. The evidence against him was compelling, including security footage, audio recordings, witness testimonies, and his own admissions. The prosecution highlighted a listening device Ali had installed, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. The defense sought to argue for voluntary manslaughter, claiming Ali struggled with mental health issues, childhood trauma, and cocaine addiction. They suggested that Anna had given Ali false hope for reconciliation, which led to his snapping when he saw her with Rayburn. A significant issue was Ali's choice to testify. Over 3 days, he reversed his initial confession in which he admitted to killing Anna and Rayburn in a cocaine-fueled rage, and instead claimed self-defense, alleging that Anna had attacked him and reached for a gun. This new claim was easily disproven because both guns belonged to Ali, and forensic evidence indicated that both Anna and Rayburn were shot while seated on the couch, not during a struggle. The prosecution effectively undermined Ali's credibility. When prosecutor Taryn Brast asked if he would agree that he had lied, Ali conceded that he had. He admitted to lying to others, and Taryn asserted that he was lying about everything that day. This significantly damaged Ali's credibility. The sentencing hearing occurred on September 6, 2024, and was emotionally charged. The court allowed 6 family members of Anna and Rayburn to give victim impact statements before the judge delivered the sentence. Anna's sister was furious and condemned Ali for the dire consequences his actions had brought to their family. She regretted not knowing the full extent of the abuse her sister had suffered and said she would have intervened to take Anna and her daughter, Amira, away. She pointed out that Ali had promised their mother to care for them and noted that her sister wouldn't have cheated if he hadn't cheated first. Rayburn's family also spoke, remembering him as a caring person who was always willing to help others. His sister, Elizabeth Barron, remarked that while their family was perceived as strong for surviving the tragedy, the reality was that it was the hardest experience they had ever faced, leaving many of them broken. Before the judge announced the sentence, Ali was allowed to address the court. He offered a statement that seemed like an apology, but he continued to justify his actions as a result of psychosis induced by banned substances. He expressed sorrow for the pain he caused Anna and Rayburn's families, but he also expressed concern that he spent more time on the stand than the jury did deliberating his fate. He lamented that they reached a verdict, despite strong evidence, indicating that this was a crime of passion. In his so-called apology, Ali attempted to downplay his actions and challenge the justice system that held him accountable. Judge Jeffrey Fraser rejected Ali's defense, clearly expressing his view that Ali was selfish, a sentiment the jury likely shared. While acknowledging Ali's talent as an actor, the judge remarked that in the Scarface videos, Ali appeared to embody a ruthless persona during his crimes, demonstrating no remorse. He suggested that any tears Ali shed in court were for himself, not for the victims, Rayburn and Anna. The judge expressed skepticism about Ali's sincerity in his apology, noting that he seemed only remorseful about the consequences of being sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. The long-awaited moment arrived when Judge Jeffrey Frazier sentenced Ali Abulaban to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years to life for firearm-related enhancements. The judge firmly stated that Ali would die in prison and never regain his freedom. The courtroom erupted in applause, and it was reported that Ali mockingly joined in, showing his complete lack of remorse and understanding of the gravity of his actions. Ana Abulaban, only 28 at the time of her murder, was a devoted mother who was finally breaking free from years of abuse. Bernd, aged 29, lost his life simply for assisting a friend when Ali's jealousy turned deadly. Tragically, their 5-year-old daughter, Amira, was left without both parents, growing up with the knowledge that her father had murdered her mother. This case underscores the urgent warning signs of domestic violence, including extreme jealousy, controlling behavior, physical abuse, and the perilous overlap between domestic violence and social media fame. Ali used his platform to showcase his abusive behavior to thousands of followers, transforming violence into content. While his online success fueled his narcissism and sense of invincibility, though justice has been served with Ali's life sentence, it is important to note that Ana had called the police multiple times and attempted to leave her abuser, but the support systems in place failed her. The most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence is when they try to escape, and Ali's reaction was clear: if he couldn't have Ana, then no one could. It is a tragedy that Ana and Bernd are no longer alive today, as their lives were cut short by Ali Abulaban's jealousy and need for control. In life, finding a true friend is like grabbing a lifeline, someone who stands by you through every storm, who protects your secrets, and who becomes your family when your own flesh and blood turn away. But what happens when that bond, the very trust that once saved you, transforms into the sharpest betrayal imaginable? Tonight's story isn't just about friendship, it's about a loyalty so twisted it became lethal, a trust so broken it ended in horror. At the center of the story is Misty Mayo, a young mother who thought she had found a sister in Christine Smith. However, she was faced with an unimaginable betrayal, and it ultimately cost her her life. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is not just a crime. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the person you trust the most can be the one who destroys you. Springtown, Texas, is a small town known for its peaceful lifestyle, and it is where Christine Smith grew up as the middle child in a family of 5. Her childhood was carefree until tragedy struck when her father died when she was just 10 years old. This loss deeply affected Christine, especially since she had always been close to her father. After some time, her mother started dating another man, and they quickly got married. She struggled to accept her stepfather, feeling that he could never replace her dad. As she entered her teenage years, her relationship with her mother also became strained. By the age of 14, she was acting out, feeling increasingly isolated and unsupported. She craved understanding and connection. Misty Mayo grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, not far from Springtown. As a child, she liked the city. Unaware of its dangers, her protective family kept a close watch on her. But crime was prevalent in Fort Worth, influencing some of her siblings' lives. This challenging environment has shaped her strong and fearless personality. She was known for speaking her mind, often appearing rude to strangers but being genuine and brave. While Christine came from a large family, Misty's was even bigger, with 7 children in total. Being one of the youngest, Misty had to assert herself to be heard, which helped her build confidence. Her family eventually moved to Springtown, attracted by its quieter atmosphere, which was suitable for raising children. Misty adapted quickly to her new town and started attending high school, where she met Christine, who was a year younger. Despite being different, they became fast friends, spending all their free time together. Christine was calm and reserved, while Misty was bold and somewhat aggressive. However, their shared interests in music and fashion helped them bond, even dressing alike at times. As Christine's struggles with her stepfather intensified in high school, she decided to run away from home in early 1999. She confided in Misty, who supported her. They skipped school to plan their escape, but Misty's brothers found them and brought them back home. Christine continued to feel uncomfortable living with her stepfather, which led her to spend more time at Misty's household, where she was welcomed as a part of the family. Meanwhile, Christine's behavior deteriorated as she entered adolescence. She began dating a boy whom her family disapproved of, particularly due to his race. They believed she was trying to provoke them. Christine insisted that she loved him. At 15, she discovered she was pregnant while still in that relationship. When her family found out, they were furious, especially when she refused to have an abortion. Ultimately, they threw her out of the house. Christine turned to her best friend, Misty, for support during a challenging time. Misty's family welcomed Christine without any judgment about her pregnancy or personal life. Misty stood by her throughout, but unfortunately, she experienced a miscarriage. In the year that followed, Misty discovered she was pregnant while in a relationship with a local guy named Stephen Gullns, who was notorious among friends for his disturbing nickname, the Psychopath. This title wasn't unfounded. He had a troubled background, including substance addiction and involvement in criminal activities. Despite the family's concerns that Stephen wouldn't be a good father, Misty loved him, and they respected her independence. By spring 2000, Misty was ready to have her baby just after her 18th birthday. She named her son Dante, and Christine was there for her throughout the hospital stay. Right after Misty was discharged, she faced a challenge because Stephen, Dante's biological father, lived in Fort Worth and had no intention of moving. Misty felt it was important for Dante to be close to his father, so she decided to move back to the city. Her family supported her decision, although they did not want her to return to her old environment. Determined, Misty moved to Fort Worth with her baby to be with Stephen, believing she would be safe with him. Despite his drug addiction, Stephen made an effort to shield Misty and their baby from harmful influences, genuinely concerned about their well-being. While he was connected to gangs, Misty was focused solely on motherhood and was trying to find a job despite her incomplete education. Misty was not surprised when Christine wanted to move to Fort Worth with her. Christine was willing to drop out of school to find a job to help support her family. Misty, feeling lost without her best friend in Springtown, agreed, and they decided to live together with Dante. After moving in, Misty quickly found a job, which made her life easier. Stephen was inconsistent in his presence, sometimes staying with them when he had nowhere else to go. Christine and Misty enjoyed their time together, with Christine helping care for Dante, reducing the need for a babysitter. Their friendship deepened, resembling that of sisters. As time passed, they settled into their new life in Fort Worth and made many friends. Christine hoped to find a nice guy and start a family like Misty did. In April 2000, she began dating a man named Robert Ramon Fuller. On December 5, 2000, Robert and his friend Jamie Demon Nickerson came over to spend time with Christine, bringing along a girl named Edwana Barrow Williams. Though Misty was fine with their gathering, she chose to step away and spend time in another room with her boyfriend and son. Jamie and Robert visited to drink and chat, but were secretly planning to rob the nearby tire shop. Christine agreed to join them, but only as a lookout for police or passers-by. She wouldn't participate in the theft itself. While Jamie and Robert smashed the shop's display case and entered, Christine and Edwana stayed in the alley, keeping watch from a distance. Within minutes, Jamie and Robert stole computers, discs, and tires from the shop. They needed to hide the stolen items before selling them, so they returned to the apartment together. Meanwhile, Misty is sleeping in another room with Stephen and her son, completely unaware of the robbery taking place just outside. Once back at the apartment, the group excitedly stored their stolen loot and threw a loud party to celebrate. Misty woke up to find unfamiliar items piled up in the living room. When she learned where they came from, she became furious and demanded that the stolen goods be removed. She didn't want to be an accomplice and feared for Stephen, her boyfriend, who had a troubled past with the law. They agreed to remove the items. Misty returned to bed, while Stephen stayed to help move the stolen goods. Unfortunately, despite Misty and Stephen's concerns, not everything was taken away. Stephen helped transport some of the items to Robert's car, but insisted on removing the rest. The group, however, had nowhere to store the items. They persuaded Stephen to let them keep the stolen goods in the apartment temporarily until they could sell them. The next morning, Misty saw the stolen items again and was angry. Although Stephen calmed her down, she was upset to learn that Christine was involved in the robbery. Misty couldn't understand how her calm friend could participate in something so wrong and just wanted everything to be resolved quickly. She was aware that using her apartment as a storage space for stolen goods could lead to severe consequences. The group's biggest issue, however, was witnesses to the crime. On December 6, while Misty was out grocery shopping, she saw police investigating the robbery scene and became worried. She feared being implicated in the crime. On her way back, she noticed police questioning witnesses who described 4 young men moving items into the same apartment building Misty had entered. Realizing how serious the situation was, she decided not to stay quiet. An hour after returning home, the police knocked on Misty's door. She didn't deny anything and let them in, where they quickly spotted the stolen items. Just then, Christine and Edwana arrived at the apartment, which proved advantageous for the detectives as they began questioning both girls. They matched the eyewitness descriptions. Edwana claimed she had never committed a crime and was only watching from the alley to alert them if she saw police. When the detectives questioned Christine next, she initially tried to protect Robert by misleading the police. However, they saw through Christine's lies and threatened to arrest Misty since the stolen items were found in her apartment. This prompted Christine to confess that Misty was innocent. She had been asleep with her son and boyfriend in another room, unaware of the theft. Christine also admitted, like Edwana, that she had acted as a lookout outside the tire shop. Christine chose to be completely honest and revealed that Stephen assisted in moving some of the stolen items, but she stressed that he was not involved in the robbery itself. This could create serious issues for Misty, as her boyfriend, Stephen, has a criminal history that could lead to him facing additional charges just for loading the stolen goods into Robert's car. Under Texas law, this action could be classified as a third-degree crime, punishable by 6 months to 2 years in prison if no one was harmed. Fortunately, because Christine and Edwana cooperated with the police, Stephen was not arrested after the interrogation. The police then went to Jamien's home. Meanwhile, Christine felt compelled to inform her boyfriend, Robert, about what was happening. He was with Jamien at the time. Christine and Edwana were immediately curious to know how law enforcement found out and why they were on the scene. They soon visited Robert to discuss the matter. Here, Jamien and Robert ask questions as if they are interrogating. Frustrated by the questions, Christine eventually left, which only led Jamien and Robert to suspect that she had informed the police. This suspicion escalated when Christine, as a atar, feeling anxious, told Jamien and Robert that the police had confronted them while they were at a mutual friend's apartment. After speaking with Christine and Edwana, Jamien and Robert became convinced that Misty was the one who reported them. Although it was unclear who initially called the police to investigate the tire shop, Edwana later confirmed it was Misty. Unbeknownst to her, Misty was in danger. She merely wanted to distance herself from the entire situation. Angry with Christine, Misty chose to unwind by going to dinner with her boyfriend, Stephen, on December 7, 2000. The following day, Misty discussed the robbery and its implications in a more casual atmosphere with friends. At 9:00 p.m. that evening, Stephen waited at a restaurant for Misty, who was unusually late. When he could no longer wait, he went to her apartment, only to find both her and their child missing. Faced with this unsettling situation, and knowing his friends were under investigation for robbery, he went to the police for help. Detectives quickly launched a search. but it yielded no leads. They first interviewed Misty's best friend, Christine. Hoping she could provide information on Misty's whereabouts, Christine recounted a bizarre story about Misty being attacked in an alley and fleeing with her 4-month-old son. However, Christine later changed her story, claiming she didn't know where Misty was, which raised suspicions. The police believed Christine was hiding something and continued pressing for the truth. Ultimately, after 8 days of keeping the secret, Christine's conscience compelled her to confess at the police station on December 15. She revealed that Misty was dead and assisted authorities in locating Misty's body in Shreveport, Louisiana. Christine led detectives to a field where they discovered human remains, partially destroyed by animals. This remains has been examined by forensic experts and confirmed to be that of Misty. She had suffered severe beatings, with multiple head and facial injuries. In addition to defensive wounds, the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Christine provided a detailed account of the events. On the evening of December 7, she, Edwana, and Robert had plans to meet Stephen and Jamian for dinner. They intended to pick up Misty and her baby from her apartment and drove in Misty's car since the car used for transporting the stolen items was hidden. Christine, Edwana, and Misty sat in the back seat, while Jamian drove and Robert sat in the front passenger seat. Instead of going to the restaurant, the group steered toward a secluded park on the outskirts, while Christine was holding Misty's baby, Dante, on her lap. Jamian and Robert attacked her. They physically assaulted her with a knife and a baton. Robert claimed he wanted to teach Misty a lesson and pressured Christine to join in the attack. Eventually, out of anger towards her friend, Christine complied. During questioning later on, she admitted her actions stemmed from her frustrations with Misty. Christine was worried that their revenge would lead to everyone being arrested. She didn't believe anyone would actually kill Misty and was uncertain about how the situation would end. At one point, Misty asked Christine if they were going to kill her, to which Robert cruelly replied, "Yes." Despite Misty's pleas for Christine to stop the assault and not harm Dante, Christine remained silent. Misty fought back fiercely, trying to escape the car. In response, the attackers used duct tape to bind her, but during the struggle, she tore the tape off and screamed for help. They attempted to silence her again, but she continued to resist until they hit her so hard that she lost consciousness. When Misty was incapacitated, they used tape to bind her mouth and nose. Fearing the worst, Christine, still holding Dante, checked if Misty was breathing and panicked when she didn't feel any air. Realizing Misty was dying, the attackers drove to a remote field in Shreveport, Louisiana, where they buried her body, stripped her of her clothes, and covered her with machine oil to prevent identification. Meanwhile, Dante was unharmed. He was simply left in a van outside a Dallas restaurant, where Child Protective Services later rescued him and placed him in foster care. After the incident, the group went to a diner to eat and chat, acting as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Stephen, Misty's boyfriend, I was waiting for her at the restaurant. When she didn't arrive, he informed her family, and together they began searching for her before contacting the police. During this time, Christine exhibited unusual behavior but continued making up stories out of fear for her own safety. During her interrogation, Christine provided details about the crime, the motives, and the identities of the other conspirators. She admitted her role in the conspiracy, hoping for some recognition for ensuring Dante's safety at Misty's request, but instead felt overwhelming guilt for not helping Misty, who had always supported her. After the trial, Christine was sentenced to life in prison. She expressed remorse and sought forgiveness from Misty's family during the trial, but her efforts were met with rejection. She was viewed as a traitor. Misty had helped her through difficult times, yet she did not attempt to save Misty when it mattered. All the co-conspirators were arrested, and subsequent trials resulted in life sentences for Jamian Demon Nickerson and Robert Ramon Fuller, while Edwana Barrow Williams received a lesser sentence of 30 years for unclear reasons. Since her imprisonment, Christine has filed several appeals for parole, all of which have been denied. Nevertheless, She continues to seek a lighter sentence and has spoken to journalists about her remorse, claiming she would do anything to reverse the events. In one interview, she mentioned that Misty visited her in a dream and expressed forgiveness for her. Some crimes are not only tragic but also serve as chilling reflections of how love, fear, and cultural conflicts can lead to devastating outcomes. Initially, this is a story about a couple in love who are eagerly anticipating their first child, a period that should be filled with joy and hope. She was 7 months pregnant, excitedly sharing her experiences of motherhood with friends and family. He is a man about to become a father, but is torn between his love for her and his family's strict Islamic values. However, behind closed doors, tension was building. Cultural differences, unexpressed fears, and hidden shame began to warp their relationship into something much more troubling. Communication became cold. Ultimatums were issued, and what should have been their happiest moments turned into a nightmare. In April 2023, that nightmare reached a climax. A mother soon discovers a horrifying scene. Her daughter and unborn grandson have been murdered, and all their hopes are shattered in the blink of an eye. What truly happened in that apartment? How did love transform into violence? What role did cultural pressures and secrecy play in pushing an expectant father to his breaking point? Stay with us, as the investigation reveals that the truth behind this tragedy is more complex, darker, and more haunting than anyone could have anticipated. In April 2023, Saga Forsgren Elneborg was 7 months pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin Abdirisek Ibrahim, who is also the father of her baby. They had been together for about 2 years and were expecting a boy, with doctors confirming that everything was progressing well. As her due date approached, Saga eagerly prepared for motherhood. She documented her pregnancy on social media, sharing photos of her growing bump and baby gear, especially the clothes she bought for her baby. On the eve of a tragic event, Saga's mother, Melisa, came to visit and help her. On April 28, Saga was supposed to meet with Mohammed Amin for some quality time, but their relationship had been facing increasing tension, and he had been visiting less frequently. Saga informed her mother about his visit, so she chose not to interrupt them. Saga is a beautiful girl with many friends, but she still faces concerns from her family about her relationship with Mohammed Amin, who is from a different culture. They were concerned about the challenges of meeting his family in Somalia, especially as she began to struggle with the relationship. However, she remains optimistic. Despite feeling embarrassed that he has not yet made their relationship public to his parents, on April 29, 2023, around 1:00 p.m., Melisa arrived at Saga's apartment in a residential complex in Örebro, several hundred kilometers from Stockholm. She intended to help her daughter and pick up some items in preparation for the birth of her grandson. When she got to the apartment, she rang the doorbell, but there was no response. Surprised, she rang it several more times and knocked, but still received no answer. Thinking that Saga was simply going out for a while, she hesitated, but eventually decided to use the spare key to get in. However, she discovered the door was not locked, which seemed suspicious since Saga usually locked up. Upon entering, Melisa noticed water running in the kitchen and rushed to turn it off while calling for Saga, but received no reply. As she moved to the next room, where the lights were off, she sensed something was wrong. When she entered and turned the light on, she was horrified to find Saga lying on the floor, lifeless, with pale skin, her hair covering her face, and a lamp cord around her neck. Nearby, a heavy table had been overturned. Adding to the horror of the scene, Melisa rushed to Saga, moved the table away from her neck, and attempted to provide first aid while calling emergency services. Melisa quickly realized that Saga's body was cold and stiff, which indicated that she had been dead for some time. Despite this, Melisa performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Unfortunately, when paramedics arrived, they confirmed that both Saga and her unborn child had died. Police arrived at the scene and began their investigation. Noting that Saga had suffered injuries to her head and face, the area was covered in dried blood and overturned jewelry boxes. Initially, detectives thought Saga may have harmed herself, as there were no signs of a break-in. However, upon closer inspection, they found no signs of mental health issues. In fact, she was excited about her pregnancy and looking forward to becoming a mother. Forensic experts collected fingerprints, blood, and DNA evidence for analysis. They determined that Saga had died from strangulation, estimating the time of death to be between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. In addition, her unborn son, weighing 1.7 kilograms, was found to be healthy. Adding to the family's anger and desire for justice, they were devastated. They never imagined that such violence could happen in their own family. Melissa informed the detectives that Saga had planned to meet friends at a local restaurant on April 28. She noted that her daughter seemed anxious and frequently checked her phone, eager for messages from her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin. Saga mentioned that he was preparing to inform his conservative Muslim parents about their relationship, but she feared they would not accept her because she was 7 months pregnant and they were not officially married. Mohammed Amin, raised in Europe, struggled to balance the expectations of his strict Muslim family with more modern views. After dinner, Saga said goodbye to her mother and friends, who were unaware they were seeing her for the last time. Tragically, she was killed shortly after returning home. Detectives speculated that Mohammed Amin might have revealed their relationship to his parents, provoking a hostile response that led to the tragedy. In the early stages of the investigation, Mohammed Amin's relatives were scrutinized, particularly his mother, who had left the house late that evening. However, it was confirmed that she had simply gone to the store and returned shortly after. No evidence implicated his relatives in the crime. Suspicion also arose from her reaction to discovering Mohammed Amin's car parked near Saga's home. By that point, his family suspected he was involved with a Christian woman. Following that discovery, his mother angrily informed him that he was unwelcome in their home, suggesting she would disown him if he violated their traditions. In response, Mohammed Amin maintained that he had not visited Saga's family. According to Melissa, the relationship between Saga and Mohammed Amin deteriorated from the beginning of her pregnancy. There were rumors that Mohammed Amin wanted her to have an abortion because he was worried about how his family would react. Despite this, Saga decided to keep the baby, expressing her willingness to raise the child alone if needed. In October, she announced her pregnancy to her family, and they were very supportive. During this period, the relationship between Saga and Mohammed Amin faced serious difficulties, and they were on the verge of breaking up. Saga was concerned about the huge cultural differences between the two, making it difficult to find common ground unless Mohammed Amin changed his perspective. Fortunately, after a few months, things seemed to improve as he adapted to her lifestyle and appeared to embrace fatherhood. Saga later moved into a new apartment, renting a larger space that included a children's room. By March 2023, Saga and Mohammed Amin were still together. Although there were troubling signs, a woman named Diana approached Saga with a confidential warning that Mohammed Amin had attempted to cause her to miscarry by harming her. She confronted him about the matter, but he denied it and claimed it was false information. Although Melissa was aware of these alarming events, she was reluctant to accept them. Sadly, after she discovered that her daughter, Saga, had been murdered, the previous testimonies began to seem more credible. The police quickly began piecing together the timeline of events. They determined that on the evening of April 27, Mohammed Amin and Saga were supposed to spend time together, but he seemed to be avoiding her. Staying late at work, that night, Saga issued an ultimatum, demanding he inform his family about their relationship and the baby, or they would break up. On April 28, they communicated throughout the day via messages, and Saga became increasingly anxious. Likely due to the emotional weight of her conversation with him, detectives reviewed mobile phone records showing ongoing messages until 11 p.m. on April 28. Mohammed Amin made it clear he would not disclose the relationship or the pregnancy to his family, prioritizing his family's approval over the child. Saga was disappointed and continued to push him to come clean, suggesting that if they broke up, he could still be exposed as the father. As she planned to seek financial support from him, through their conversations, they both seemed to agree that he would eventually tell his family. Mohammed Amin expressed feeling extremely anxious, saying his heart felt like it would burst. This was his last message to her before she was killed. The detectives suspect that her determination to inform Mohammed Amin's family has created a motive for him to attack her. He became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. Mohammed Amin denied any involvement in Saga's death, claiming that on the night of the murder, he went to his family to confess about their relationship. However, geolocation data indicated this was not true. Instead, he had gone to Saga's apartment. Notably, investigators initially kept information about Saga's death from him. During the interrogation, he acted unnaturally calm, even joking with detectives when they mentioned the apartment where her body was discovered, showing no visible reaction as if he was feigning ignorance. When told he was the main suspect, Mohammed Amin became defensive, insisting he had an alibi and was with a friend when the murder occurred. However, his friend spoke with someone else on the phone during that time and refused to corroborate his story. Although the alibi evidence has been dismissed, he still insists that he last met Saga on the evening of April 27, contrary to what he had previously stated, particularly regarding the apartment he claims to be unaware of. Mohammed Amin said he went to the apartment and talked to Saga about a sensitive issue. Specifically, they discussed the need for him to admit to his parents about their relationship. Saga, on the other hand, encouraged him to move in with her to build a life together. However, during the investigation, detectives discovered that Mohammed Amin had never spent a full night at her apartment because he was afraid his family would find out. Although he promised several times to move in, he always came up with excuses to avoid it. Given Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior, law enforcement decided to arrest him and hold him in custody while they investigated the case. He spent several months in custody, during which the prosecution gathered strong evidence against him. They were confident they had enough to win at trial, and even used specially trained dogs to help identify various pieces of evidence. Mohammed Amin's lawyer argued that dog evidence was unreliable, but it was not the only evidence they had. The DNA analysis took the longest time but ultimately cleared any doubts. Mohammed Amin had wrapped a lamp cord around Saga's neck while she was asleep on the couch. Police said he also pulled her to the floor and attempted to push her onto her stomach to induce an abortion. Saga fought back, managing to close her legs, but suffered a hip injury in the process. Eventually, he tried to strangle her using a tabletop, pressing it against her throat. Exhausted from her struggle, she suffocated under the weight. After her death, the tabletop was left on her neck, creating a deep mark on her body. After committing this crime, Mohammed Amin tried to stage a robbery by scattering boxes around the apartment. His defense claimed that Saga had been a victim of robbers who stole money and several appliances. However, the prosecution argued that this staging only highlighted his guilt. During searches, several stolen items were found on Mohammed Amin. He maintained that they were his personal belongings and gifts from Saga. A significant piece of evidence was that his DNA was found under Saga's fingernails. Furthermore, forensic experts, a young woman with a gentle reputation, surrounded by loving family and friends, suddenly splits from her boyfriend and becomes emotionally withdrawn. Just days later, she drives to the Gap in Sydney's eastern suburbs and jumps. At first, it seems like a heartbreaking tragedy caused by young love. But as police investigate, they realize it was more than just an unfortunate accident. It was a carefully orchestrated trap. But who did it? And why? Renee Marsden was born on October 15, 1992. In Sydney, her mother, Teresa, raised her on her own until Mark came into their lives. He wasn't just Teresa's new partner. He became a real father figure to Renee. When Renee turned 5, Teresa and Mark got married. Their family grew with the addition of her younger brothers and her sister. Renee was Teresa's only daughter from a previous relationship, but she never felt like an outsider. Even though she and Mark weren't related by blood, their relationship was warm and close. As she grew older, Renee officially took the last name Marsden to reflect her deep connection to the family. Renee was always known for her bright and open personality. She was emotional yet grounded. People loved her for being genuine and always willing to help. She had a natural way of putting others at ease. Despite her gentle demeanor, Renee possessed a quiet inner strength shaped by her life experiences. After graduating, Renee began working at a healthcare facility. She still lived at home with her parents. Even though she was highly independent, she often helped care for her younger siblings and remained involved in family life. Despite being an adult, she never distanced herself from home. Family was her anchor. Renee avoided arguments, preferring to communicate, understand others, and find solutions everyone could agree on. Her kindness made her susceptible to subtle manipulation, particularly by those she trusted. That's when Camila Zidane entered Renee's life. The two met while attending a private Catholic school. What began as a friendship built on shared interests and dreams for the future quickly took a darker turn. Camila displayed a constant need for Renee's undivided attention. Anytime Renee tried to make new friends or spend time with other girls, Camila would lash out or grow cold. Over time, Camila's behavior became possessive. She demanded Renee's full attention, tried to control her social interactions, and erupted in jealousy. Even over something as small as Renee mentioning a classmate, Renee began to feel uneasy, though she didn't fully understand what was happening. Still, ending the friendship wasn't easy. Camila was a skilled manipulator, charming when she wanted to be, persuasive, and quick to play the victim. She created the illusion that she needed Renee in her life. The emotional pressure kept building. Camila could suddenly shut Renee out for days without explanation, only to return acting warm and affectionate. The relationship became toxic, marked by a cycle of emotional attachment, confusion, and psychological stress. Any moments of care were overshadowed by manipulation and instability. Eventually, Camila began pressuring Renee about her clothing choices and who she could spend time with, imposing her own preferences. Any pushback was met with hostility. If Renee voiced disagreement, Camila would break into tears, accuse her of betrayal, or claim she didn't value their friendship enough. Her manipulative behavior grew more sophisticated over time, relying on emotional pressure, guilt-tripping, and passive-aggressive tactics rather than open threats. Even after graduation, their connection didn't fade. It intensified. Camila continued to influence Renee's decisions, maintaining control over the relationship. Renee, in turn, grew more withdrawn, her personal boundaries slowly eroding, making it nearly impossible for her to recognize how dangerous the situation had become. The changes in Renee were undeniable. She became anxious, quiet, and began avoiding social interactions. Her mother, Teresa, sensed something was wrong, but Camila, always polite in front of adults, became even more calculating behind the scenes. Their friendship devolved into psychological dependency, where Renee lost her sense of agency, and Camila assumed the role of an emotional abuser. This period laid the groundwork for what was to come. By the time school ended, Renee was worn down by constant stress. Arguments grew more intense, and Camila's outbursts more frequent. Renee began confiding in others, first a cousin, then her mother. She expressed a need for distance, saying the friendship felt suffocating. But every time she tried to pull away, Camila would reel her back in with emotional pleas or veiled threats of disappearing altogether. Renee made her first real attempt to break free by transferring to a new school. But soon after, Camila transferred there too. At first glance, it seemed like a gesture of devotion, but in reality, it was another tactic to maintain control. The new school didn't offer the fresh start Renee had hoped for. Camila was still there, hovering in the background, texting constantly, inserting herself into René's daily life. Her attempts to control René escalated. She would randomly appear at cafes, gyms, or on campus. If René didn't reply to messages immediately, her phone would be flooded with missed calls. René started concealing her plans, but that only increased the pressure. One day, overwhelmed, René ran away from home. She told no one and had no plan. It was a spur-of-the-moment escape, but even far from home, she found no peace. Camila tracked her down and convinced her to return. After that, René began leaving home more often, staying with relatives, friends, or renting short-term apartments. Her mother, Teresa, was deeply worried, but didn't know how to help. A direct conversation with Camila proved futile. Camila insisted everything was fine and accused René of being inconsistent and ungrateful. Even therapy brought little clarity. René struggled to articulate the problem because Camila never used direct threats or overt aggression. From the outside, it looked like a confusing emotional bond, one where René felt guilty simply for wanting her freedom. Then came a moment that changed everything. Camila struck René in public, on a busy street, surrounded by people. It was sudden and humiliating. What resonated with René wasn't just the act itself, but the reactions of the strangers around them. Some stopped and stared. Others quickly walked away. That moment served as a wake-up call. The breaking point came at a football game, when Camila caused a scene, screaming, blaming, even attempting to get physical. After that, René stopped answering her calls, blocked her number, and moved to a different address. Soon after, Camila abruptly left the country without explanation. It seemed the nightmare was finally over. However, upon her return, Camila shared some shocking news. She had met a man named Bernd Spiteri. She claimed they connected while she was visiting a correctional facility. She said, Bernd was serving time for a serious offense involving a fight that had ended in someone's death. Although he insisted it was self-defense, the court handed down a long sentence. Camila portrayed Bernd's story as one of hardship, resilience, and injustice, designed to evoke sympathy for a man with a troubled past. That's how René first heard about him. Through Camila. Camila acted as the go-between, sharing stories about him, reading his letters aloud, and showing pictures. Over time, she began passing on messages supposedly from him, first verbally, then by phone. René didn't realize how easily she was being drawn in. It started with short notes, and soon evolved into long letters. Bernd shared his past, reflected on life, and expressed deep gratitude for her support. It all felt genuine. He had a distinct way of communicating, a blend of vulnerability and strength. He opens up about his past struggles and trust issues, telling René that he sees her as someone he can trust. He asked about her life, her family, and opened up about his innermost thoughts. Camila was just the messenger, or so she claimed, relaying messages back and forth. Eventually, it became routine. René began receiving texts from a separate phone, messages she believed were from Bernd. He never called, only texted. Camila explained this away, saying it was because of restrictions tied to his confinement. At some point, René fell for him, a man she had never actually met. He seemed caring, attentive, and supportive. Bernd painted vivid pictures of their future together, talking about being free, starting fresh, and insisting he had never felt anything like this before. He talked about creating a family, a home, and a fulfilling life, promising René the stability, warmth she had always wanted. Camila remained deeply embedded in this dynamic. She claimed to be helping two lonely souls find each other. But René had no direct access to Bernd. Every message went through Camila first. Even the gifts René sent for him had to be delivered to Camila. A few weeks in, Bernd created a Facebook profile and added René. The page looked real, With photos, updates, and status posts, he began messaging her from that account. Their connection deepened. He became part of her everyday routine. Morning texts, goodnight messages, even discussions about wedding plans. It all became intertwined with her real life. From the outside, the situation looked suspicious. There were no phone calls, no video chats, no in-person meetings. Yet Renee believed it all. Letters kept coming. The Facebook page was active. Messages arrived on time. Camila remained involved, occasionally disappearing for a few days, claiming she had visited Braden at the facility to deliver Renee's letters. She would return with new stories, pictures, and fresh messages. No one around Renee knew the full details of this relationship. She kept it private, even from those closest to her. Her mother knew she was talking to someone, but not much beyond that. Renee worried that others might question the relationship and destroy a bond into which she had already invested so much emotion. The secrecy only made the connection feel more intense, and in that isolation, Camila once again became central, not as a controlling friend this time, but as the gatekeeper between Renee and what she believed was her shot at happiness. The relationship with Braden moved fast. Renee became deeply immersed in her connection with him. He became part of her daily rhythm. She woke up to his messages and fell asleep thinking about him. Braden emphasized trust, telling Renee it was crucial for him. He asked her to keep him updated on her every move and interaction, promising honesty in return. But over time, his demands escalated. He wanted to know her exact location, requested explanations for where she went and who she met, eventually gained access to her passwords, all under the guise of keeping her safe. If Renee didn't reply right away, Braden accused her of not caring. He said she was ignoring him or being disloyal. He grew jealous of her friends, colleagues, and anyone who entered her life. Yet he continued to declare his love, calling her his bride, even asking her to start picking out names for their future family. Renee found herself under constant emotional pressure. She began apologizing for every perceived mistake, growing increasingly anxious in her efforts to please Braden and avoid upsetting him. His controlling behavior was framed as love, shaped by what he claimed were the difficult experiences of his past. Outwardly, Renee's life looked unchanged. She still went to work, spent time with her family, and stayed close to her mother. But emotionally, she became more isolated, sharing fewer details with anyone around her. She feared judgment. She worried someone might question the relationship. At times, Braden would suddenly go silent. Renee would text and call, but there was no response. Camila always had an explanation. His phone had been confiscated. There was a security check at the facility. Days later, Braden would reappear, thanking Renee for her patience, then reaffirming his love. The cycle repeated again and again. Control, conflict, silence, forgiveness. Slowly, Renee began to accept this as normal. In her mind, she had built a vision of their future together. Camila fueled these fantasies, adding little details about what Braden had supposedly said about her and how he dreamed of starting a new life once he was free. As time passed, Renee drifted further from reality. Braden became her emotional anchor, her purpose, the center of her thoughts. Everything else faded into the background. And behind this intense connection, steering it from the shadows, was always the same figure, Camila. Years passed since the relationship began, and during that time, Ian entered Renee's life. He was everything Braden wasn't: calm, dependable, respectful, a coworker who listened without judgment, cared without controlling, and gave her space to breathe. Compared to her past experiences, Ian felt like a safe haven. For the first time in a long while, Renee felt accepted and at peace. Their relationship developed quickly. Ian met Renee's mother, who was impressed by his kindness and sincerity. He was serious about the future, and soon, He proposed. With her mother's support, Renee accepted. Hopeful, she had finally found stability. But the past hadn't released its grip. Even after the engagement, Renee secretly continued communicating with Bernd through Camilla, who arranged their contact, updated her on his supposed life, and reinforced his feelings. Renee was torn between Ian's real-world stability and the emotional pull of Bernd's promises. The conflict intensified. Ian noticed changes, distance, uncertainty. He confronted her, asking if she was truly ready for marriage. At first, Renee denied it, but eventually she admitted she had been in contact with someone else. Renee broke off the engagement. Ian accepted it quietly and walked away. After the breakup, the tension escalated. Camilla reappeared, increasingly intrusive. Confrontations became louder, sometimes even physical. One incident outside Renee's home was so heated that neighbors reported it. Renee avoided involving law enforcement, preferring to keep things private. Soon after, Camilla left town. Claiming she was seeking treatment, Renee tried to regain her balance. She minimized contact with shared acquaintances and distanced herself from the past. She cut off communication with Bernd. No more texts. No more letters. For the first time in years, everything went quiet. On July 5, 2013, Renee sent Camilla a farewell letter. Calm, clear, and final. She ended all contact and declared she was moving forward, free from the emotional hold that had defined her life. It would be their last direct communication. But even at a distance, Camilla persisted. She gathered information through mutual acquaintances, sent indirect messages, and tried subtle ways to reinsert herself. Her actions were quiet but consistent, leaving Renee uneasy, though still determined to avoid any direct contact. Later, it was revealed that Camilla had never truly let go. Even when she wasn't physically present, she tracked Renee's movements and maintained access to details about her life. After sending the final letter, Renee cut off all contact. Camilla went silent. Bernd stopped writing. Days turned into weeks. The silence was jarring after the constant, emotionally charged communication that had defined her life. Now, there was nothing. At first, Renee continued writing to Bernd. Letters filled with hope, then doubt, then quiet desperation. Some were short, others long and emotional, but none received a reply. The last one was sent at the end of July. After that, only silence. She didn't try to reach Camilla directly, but she searched for her online and asked mutual acquaintances if they had seen her. It was as if Camilla had vanished, deliberately cutting every tie. Renee desperately wanted answers. She replayed conversations, reread letters, listened to old voice messages, searching for clues. What once felt real and sincere now seemed fractured, false. Doubt grew stronger by the day. For the first time, she voiced those doubts. In a quiet conversation with her mother, Renee admitted she wasn't sure Bernd was real. On August 5, 2013, she made a phone call to Oldenburg Correctional Center, the prison where she believed he was being held. She gave her name and asked a direct question. Is there anyone here by the name Bernd Spiteri? The answer was brief and final. There was no such inmate. There never had been. In that moment, the foundation of the past 2 years collapsed. Renee didn't share the full details with her mother. Outwardly, she seemed composed, but Teresa later recalled there was a look in her daughter's eyes that day, a quiet exhaustion she had never seen before. Afterward, Renee searched obsessively for proof. She combed databases, looked through names, photos, forums, but every path led nowhere. Bernd didn't exist. At the same time, she sent Camilla a letter asking that, "Where is Bernd? Why did he disappear?" But Camilla never responded. The one person who had tied it all together was gone. Renee was left alone, unable to explain what had happened. Everything that had defined her life for 2 years had turned out to be fiction, and the only person who knew the truth showed no empathy, no interest. Inside, she had lost all sense of stability. The morning of August 5, 2013, began like any other. She had breakfast with her mother. She seemed calm, not cheerful, not distressed, just quiet. Afterward, she went to her room. As she often did, nothing appeared unusual. At 12:44 p.m., Renée sent Camila a final message. She know Braden doesn't exist. It was the first and only time Renée confronted her directly. No accusations, no demands, just the truth. Exactly 4 minutes later, at 12:48 p.m., Renée drove to the Gap in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Renée texted her mother. Nearby cameras showed Renée throwing an object into the ocean, which investigators believe was her phone. At 5:56 p.m., Renée is seen climbing down the cliff and disappearing. Her body has not been found. At first, Renée's death was classified as self-harm, with no immediate signs of foul play. But when investigators began collecting digital evidence, her phone, laptop, cloud backups, and social media accounts, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Specialists traced years of correspondence with the fictitious Braden Spiteri. Technical analysis confirmed that the vast majority of messages and voice recordings came from devices belonging to Camila Zaiden, Renée's former school friend. Even though fake accounts and anonymous platforms had been used, the digital trail was unmistakable. IP addresses matched Camila's home internet connection. Investigators also recovered deleted conversations, revealing that Camila had been simultaneously posing as herself, as Braden, and as several other invented personas. The records showed a calculated pattern of psychological manipulation, later described by experts as sustained emotional abuse. One crucial discovery was that in the days leading up to Renée's death, she received threatening and emotionally destabilizing messages. Braden accused her of betrayal and even fabricated messages from supposed prison guards and relatives. One false message declared that Braden had died, an intentional emotional blow. Friends and family described how Renée's personality had changed over the years. Many knew Camila as a supportive friend, but none realized she had orchestrated a deceptive online relationship. When questioned, Camila denied involvement, claiming she believed Braden was real. But once presented with the technical evidence, she offered no explanation and invoked her right to remain silent. The scale of the deception was staggering. Investigators found drafts of fake letters, scripted dialogues, and carefully constructed timelines of imaginary events. Camila had even experimented with voice modulation software to create male-sounding audio messages. Her computer history showed searches on how to disguise a voice, evidence that she had planned the deception meticulously. By 2014, police had completed their investigation and referred the case to the New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions. But despite the extensive evidence, prosecutors ultimately decided not to file charges. The law, at that time, did not recognize catfishing or online emotional manipulation as a criminal offense unless it involved financial fraud, blackmail, or direct threats of violence. The decision sparked intense public debate. Many argued that Renée's case showed how devastating online deception could be and highlighted the urgent need for legal reform. Her parents, Teresa and Mark, began advocating for a change in legislation, determined that no other family should endure such a loss without accountability. This advocacy continued into 2020, when the New South Wales Coronial Inquest reviewed the police investigation into Renée's death. Despite extensive digital evidence showing that Camila Zaiden had created and controlled the fictitious Braden Spiteri, the inquest confirmed there was still no legal basis to bring criminal charges under existing laws. At the time, Australian law did not recognize online deception and psychological manipulation without financial fraud or explicit threats as criminal offenses. The coroner recommended further review by the NSW Domestic Violence Death Review Team to explore options under coercive control provisions. The decision devastated Renee's family. They firmly believed that their daughter had been the victim of calculated emotional abuse that directly contributed to her death. For them, the lack of accountability was another form of injustice. The case drew wide public attention. Legal experts, digital criminologists, and mental health professionals all highlighted the gaps in existing legislation. How could years of sustained emotional manipulation, carried out through fabricated online personas, not be prosecutable? Public debate intensified, with many arguing that Renee's case should become a turning point in recognizing the dangers of catfishing. In the aftermath, Camila Zidane avoided public scrutiny. She did not speak to the press, and her family issued a brief statement expressing sorrow but offering no further comment. She faced intense criticism but remained outside the reach of the law. Meanwhile, Teresa and Mark Marsden began advocating for legislative change. They called for the creation of new laws addressing online impersonation and emotional abuse, determined to ensure that no other family would endure what they had. Their campaign gained support, but, despite petitions and media coverage, progress was slow. Officially, Renee's death remained recorded as self-harm. Today, the tragedy of Renee Marsden is remembered not only for the cruelty of the deception she endured, but also for exposing a legal blind spot in Australia's criminal code. Her story continues to be cited in discussions about cybercrime, psychological abuse, and the urgent need to adapt the law to protect victims in the digital age. September 23, 2018, a quiet Florida home turned into a nightmare. Inside, 4 children froze in terror as a gunshot shattered the night. On the couch lay their mother, Samantha Keithley, shot dead in her own living room. And the man holding the gun was not an intruder, not a masked killer. It was her husband, a sheriff's deputy, the very person sworn to protect. Just an hour earlier, Samantha had sent desperate texts to her best friend, pleading for help, saying her husband had lost his mind after 6 relentless hours of harassment. Minutes later, her life was gone, stolen by the man she trusted most. This is the harrowing story of betrayal, violence, and a family torn apart. The story of Samantha Keithley, a mother, a friend, a fighter, whose final cries for help went unanswered. Samantha Keithley was born on December 29, 1984, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Her early life was defined by both tragedy and resilience. At 16, she lost her mother to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Instead of collapsing in grief, she became the pillar that held the whole family together. This responsibility shaped Samantha into the remarkable woman she became, someone who instinctively protected and cared for others. Even when she was struggling herself, the family moved to Brandon, Florida, where Samantha attended Bloomingdale High School. There, she met Kristen Kellen, who became her lifelong best friend. They graduated together in 2003, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and Samantha's infectious personality. Friends noticed there was something special about her. She loved life. Kristen later described Samantha as energetic, stunningly beautiful, fun-loving, and someone with whom she shared great times. But it wasn't only Samantha's vivaciousness that drew people in. She had a rare gift for making others feel valued and safe. This quality showed up throughout her life, in the care she gave her younger brother and in the support she offered friends in need. In 2012, Samantha married Kirk Keithley, creating a happy family with 4 children, Mark and Ezra, 14, Samantha's son from a previous marriage, Peyton, 7, Kirk's son from a prior marriage, and their 2 daughters together, Olivia, R. 4, and Alan, 2. From the outside, they seemed to have everything they could want. In February 2018, they purchased their dream home on Terrazzo Way in the Bexley subdivision of Land O'Lakes. The two-story, cream-colored house cost $322,000 and represented their American dream. The neighborhood was safe, family-friendly, and close to good schools. The perfect place to raise their children. By September 2018, Samantha was balancing two demanding careers while raising 4 children. She had worked at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tampa for over a decade and had recently been promoted to assistant manager. The casino felt like a second home. She knew the business inside and out, and colleagues admired her dedication and work ethic. Not content to stop there, Samantha also studied nursing and explored her entrepreneurial side through real estate. Despite having no formal background in property, she joined Keller Williams Realty in Lakeland and quickly showed promise. Her team leader, Damon Boyce, said she fit right in and had an eye for higher-end listings. In her short time there, she was doing extremely well in the Tampa Bay area. Her colleague Chris McLaughlin called her Wonder Woman for managing so much while raising 4 children. Friends marveled at her ability to juggle early mornings at the casino, late nights studying real estate law, school runs, packed lunches, and homework help, making it all look effortless. More importantly, she made those around her feel loved and supported. At the time, Kirk was seen as a calm, reliable law enforcement professional, the kind of person any family would want. He served as a Hillsborough County Sheriff's Deputy beginning June 15, 2009. After working at the St. Petersburg Police Department from 2003 to 2009, his nearly 2-decade career seemed steady, undistinguished, but also incident-free. Yet subtle warning signs were there. As Samantha's family would later recognize, her relatives described Kirk as arrogant and withdrawn during family gatherings. Her younger brother, Taylor Sling, said that at family dinners, Kirk made his wife's family feel that he did not want to be close to them or get to know them. Kirk's professional record, while not disqualifying, revealed concerning patterns. In 2016, he was reprimanded for misuse of communications systems. In 2011, he received a counseling letter for an avoidable traffic crash. Most notably, a 2008 review from the St. Petersburg Police Department noted his overly stern demeanor and recommended that he receive training in interpersonal skills. The word stern in the internal review is particularly striking. It suggests coldness, distance, and a lack of the warmth needed to work effectively with the community. The supervisor's recommendation for additional training suggests that Kirk's difficulty connecting with others was evident at work. Despite these concerns, there were no documented domestic violence calls to their home. Even close friends and family saw nothing that suggested Samantha faced immediate danger. This is common in domestic violence cases involving law enforcement. Perpetrators know how to avoid official scrutiny while maintaining control in private. Neighbors, however, noticed troubling dynamics. Mike Griffith, who lived across the street from the Kirks for 5 years before they moved to Land O'Lakes in February 2018, prides himself on knowing everyone in the neighborhood, but he could never connect with Kirk. Mike said that Samantha was very friendly to him unless Kirk was present. In those moments, she would only offer a perfunctory greeting or a wave. In hindsight, this suggests Samantha adjusted her behavior when Kirk was present, a common pattern in controlling relationships. Mike tried to get Kirk to open up, even introducing him to another deputy from Georgia to create common ground. Mike recalled that he had just turned his back and ignored them. Such social withdrawal can be a red flag in domestic violence, reflecting efforts to isolate a partner from supportive relationships. Abusers often isolate victims to prevent them from seeking help or maintaining relationships that could offer perspective. Still, even these signs rarely predict the exact moment violence escalates. Experts note that the most dangerous time for a victim is when they attempt to leave or assert independence. Samantha's success in real estate may have threatened Kirk's sense of control. Her case is especially devastating because it reflects a broader pattern. Law enforcement officers, as a group, are statistically more likely to commit domestic violence than the general population, and these incidents are disproportionately likely to be fatal. Kirk's co-workers had no idea what was happening at home. Domestic violence in law enforcement families often goes unreported and undetected. Officers know how to avoid leaving evidence, how investigations unfold, and victims often fear that reporting will be futile, especially when the abuser's colleagues would be the ones responding. Compounding this, police work exposes officers to constant stress, violence, trauma, and human suffering. Without adequate mental health support and coping strategies, some turn to alcohol, banned substances, or violence. In Kirk's case, the toxicology report later revealed how impaired he was the night he killed Samantha. His blood alcohol content was 156, nearly twice Florida's legal limit, and he had oxycodone in his system. He was in no condition to make rational decisions. On September 23, 2018, the evening started off normally, but quickly became tense at the Kirk house. Samantha is sick, which should be taken care of by her husband, Kirk. Instead, her condition became the spark for 6 hours of harassment that ended in tragedy. Samantha repeatedly asked Kirk to leave her alone so she could rest. Rather than respecting her request, he grew increasingly agitated and aggressive. As the night wore on and Kirk drank more, his behavior became more erratic. The exact cause of his rage remains unclear. Whether it was work, stress, financial strain, jealousy over Samantha's growing success in real estate, or a volatile mix of alcohol, banned substances, and controlling behavior, the situation became so dangerous that Samantha decided to leave. She went to a hotel. This shows she recognized the risk and tried to protect herself by creating distance, an understandable attempt to de-escalate. Tragically, she returned home. Maybe she thought Kirk had calmed down, worried about the children, or felt she had no other option. Whatever the reason, coming back proved fatal. Her return suggests she may not have fully understood how dangerous the situation was. This pattern is common in domestic violence. Victims often underestimate the danger because they cannot imagine their partner would kill them. Psychological manipulation can cloud judgment and make safety hard to assess. At 11:50 p.m., Samantha sent her final, desperate text to her friend, Kristen. She said that Kirk had lost his mind and was literally losing it, that he had been harassing her for the previous 6 hours, and that she had repeatedly asked him to leave her alone because she was sick. These messages show that Samantha is in crisis and looking for help. She also wrote that she had just thrown her ring out, referring to her wedding band, a symbolic declaration that the marriage was over. This act of defiance may have further angered Kirk. Timing matters. At 11:50 p.m., Samantha was alive and reaching out. Just over an hour later, she would be dead. Kristen didn't see the messages until 2:00 a.m. and too late to help. The guilt Kristen feels over not seeing those messages in time is unimaginable. Around midnight on September 24, 2018, Kirk shot Samantha as she sat on the downstairs couch, suggesting she may not have anticipated the attack. She might have believed he had calmed down or simply been exhausted after hours of harassment. After shooting Samantha, Kirk goes upstairs and self-harms. 4 children were in the home during this nightmare, left to carry lifelong trauma from what they witnessed and heard. 14-year-old Mark showed extraordinary courage. After hearing the gunshot and finding his mother's body, he didn't freeze or panic. Instead, he acted quickly to protect his younger siblings and get help. He even crawled under the garage door to escape. Clear proof of his presence of mind in the midst of trauma. Mark made the critical 911 call that alerted authorities to the tragedy. His words conveyed the horror of what he had seen, yet he showed remarkable composure for someone so young. He sobbed as he said that his mother had been shot and that his stepfather had shot her in the head. Despite his grief and fear, Mark gave the dispatcher essential details. The dispatcher asked about the location of weapons and what had happened. Mark explained that his stepfather and mother had argued the night before. His mother went to a hotel and later returned. He then heard them arguing again, followed by a gunshot. When he went outside, he found his mother bleeding and unresponsive. His plain, heartbreaking words, that she was bloody and that he had seen her dead, conveyed the unbearable reality he faced. No child should ever witness such a scene, let alone describe it to a 911 dispatcher. For several tense minutes, dispatchers tried calling back with no success. They didn't know whether Mark was safe or whether Kirk remained a threat. Finally, Mark called back, explaining his phone had stopped working. By then, a friend's father had taken over the call, telling the dispatcher that Mark was with him and struggling. This offered some relief. The other children were safe with neighbors. When the county police arrived after midnight, they witnessed a scene that haunted them. Samantha was found on the couch, killed by a gunshot wound. Upstairs, Kirk was discovered dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot. All 4 children were physically safe but deeply traumatized. Toxicology later confirmed that Kirk was under the influence of alcohol and oxycodone. This combination of depressants can severely impair judgment, increase aggression, and drive reckless behavior to deadly extremes. The tragedy rippled through multiple communities. The real estate community mobilized immediately. Within 24 hours, colleagues launched a GoFundMe that ultimately raised nearly $80,000 for the 4 children. The children were placed in the care of Samantha's father, and the community's support provided a foundation for their future needs. The Samantha Keithley case had already exposed gaps in law enforcement's mental health support, but the crisis deepened just 3 months later with Deputy Terry Strawn. Unlike Kirk, Terry was a well-regarded veteran with no disciplinary record and had recently been rehired as a school resource officer. Yet on December 19, 2018, he killed his wife, granddaughter, and daughter, then took his own life, announcing each act over the police radio. The contrast with Kirk was stark. Kirk acted in a drunken rage. Terry acted with chilling precision. Both, however, were decorated officers. Both left devastated families. And in both cases, colleagues saw few warning signs. Terry's case felt especially wrenching, not only because of his strong reputation, but because his granddaughter attended the very school he was assigned to protect. Together, these cases exposed the risk of domestic violence within law enforcement families and the shortcomings of mental health support. Resources. Many officers avoided due to stigma. Samantha's death prompted changes that may have saved many other families from similar tragedies. The 4 children she adored carry her legacy forward. In death, as in life, Samantha Keithley continues to protect others through the reforms her case inspired. We should remember Samantha not for the cruelty of what happened, but for the light she carried. In the early hours of August 27, 2023, the quiet streets of Lambaréné were shattered by a nightmare. A young woman was hit 4 times in a row by a car. Neighbors rushed outside. Her family screamed in horror. She lay in a pool of blood, suffering from multiple serious injuries. But how did a bright, ambitious, 20-year-old end up the victim of such brutal violence? To answer that question, we need to look at the story of Katia Brites. Katia Brites was born on September 1, 2002, in Paraguay. She grew up in the city of Lambaréné, in the Central Department, where she lived with her father, Albino Brites, and her older sister, Johanna. Her bond with Johanna was more than just that of siblings. They were inseparable best friends. They loved singing together, belting out songs, or curling up side by side to watch movies. Details about Katia's mother remain unclear. What is known is that she was absent from her daughters' lives, and the reasons for her absence were never explained. Despite this, Katia grew up with boundless energy. Friends described her as a bright soul who radiated joy and always looked for the silver lining. Her smile could light up a room, and her optimism made her a source of strength for others. From a young age, Katia dreamed of traveling the world, determined to make that dream a reality. In 2020, she enrolled in an aeronautics academy and completed an intensive year-long program. Though still too young to begin flying professionally, she continued her studies, pursuing a technical degree and related courses to broaden her knowledge. At the same time, she worked at a local gym, greeting customers with her natural warmth. The job suited her perfectly. She had a gift for connecting with people and making them feel welcome. Katia's passions extended beyond aviation. She also dreamed of becoming a sports journalist. Football was in her blood, and she was a devoted supporter of Club Olimpia, one of Paraguay's most important teams. She rarely missed a chance to go to the stadium with her father, joining the chants of the hinchas and singing every song by heart. Her life seemed full of promise, overflowing with energy, love, and plans for the future. Then, like many young people, she found romance. The man who caught her attention was a young Paraguayan named Osvaldo Zaracho Fernandez. He lived with his grandmother and survived on small Bratian, informal jobs. In 2021, Katia and Osvaldo began a relationship. At first, he seemed like the perfect boyfriend, thoughtful, attentive, and full of compliments. But over time, a darker, controlling side emerged. The kindness faded, replaced by jealousy, threats, and manipulation. What began with sweet gestures soon spiraled into emotional and physical abuse. For 2 years, Katia endured this cycle, giving him second chances, hoping he might change. On February 3, 2023, she finally reached her breaking point. With courage, she ended the relationship for good, but Osvaldo refused to let go. Just 3 days later, he forced his way into her home without permission, and even appeared at an event she attended. Terrified, Katia went to the police and filed a complaint. The harassment didn't stop. On February 14, she returned to the Central Police Station in San Lorenzo, Lambaré, reporting something far more serious. Her ex-partner had once again entered her home, physically assaulted her, and even tried to strangle her. Prosecutors opened a case for attempted femicide and requested preventive detention for Osvaldo. But in a controversial twist, the charges were downgraded to domestic violence. A prosecutor argued that her injuries were not life-threatening, dismissing the danger she had described. Because of that decision, Osvaldo was granted house arrest with the sole condition that he not contact Katia, an order he ignored completely. On April 22, Katia filed her third complaint. Once again, Osvaldo had broken into her home, blatantly violating the protective order. Reports stated he was carrying a weapon and continued to harass her relentlessly through text messages. Yet, in an inexplicable move, just 3 days later, a prosecutor requested his provisional dismissal, reasoning that Katia had been unable to attend a scheduled court hearing and that, supposedly, no further steps had been taken in the investigation. The warnings were there. The evidence was on record. Yet the authorities' response was tragically insufficient. Instead of guaranteeing Katia's safety, the prosecutor's decision stripped her of the little protection she had. As time passed, just days before her 21st birthday, she and her friends decided to celebrate a little early, planning a gathering for Saturday, August 26, 2023. That evening, her sister Johanna painted her nails, a small gesture of love and care. As the older sister, Johanna loved pampering her, and Katia, always attentive to her appearance, enjoyed every moment of it. At the end of the party, in the early morning hours of Sunday, August 27, a friend named Elias Ferreira offered to drive her home. Katia didn't own a car, and it wasn't safe for her to walk alone through the neighborhood at that hour. Elias pulled up near her house, but the street was narrow. A white car parked along the curb made it impossible to get closer, so he stopped at the corner. Everything seemed normal. Katia said goodbye, stepped out of the car, and began walking toward her gate. That was when the parked car suddenly roared to life. In an instant, it accelerated and slammed into her with brutal force. The noise jolted neighbors awake. Her father, Albino, and her sister, Johanna, rushed outside, confused by the chaos unfolding in the dark. The driver of the vehicle appeared to be trying to escape. Albino told Johanna to record the scene on her phone, desperate to preserve evidence for the police. Neither of them yet realized that the victim lying in the street was Katya. Witnesses described the horror in detail. The driver deliberately struck her again and again. Each time she tried to rise, the car ran over her. Elias, still in his car, rushed out to help, wanting to lift her and take her to the hospital. But the attacker had other intentions. In his frenzy, the driver rammed Elias's car, destroying it completely. The scene dissolved into chaos. Neighbors, outraged and desperate, banded together to stop the aggressor, managing to immobilize him, and in their anger, beating him before police arrived. Meanwhile, Elias ran several blocks to find a patrol. Having lost his phone in the confusion, but knowing time was critical, when Albino and Johanna finally reached the fallen young woman, the truth hit them with unbearable force. The victim was Katya. Later, Johanna told local media that her only instinct was to throw herself to the ground and hold her sister in her arms. Before losing consciousness, Katya used the last of her strength to name her attacker. Twice, she whispered the same name, Osvaldo. Moments later, she collapsed. She was rushed to Lambaret Hospital with severe trauma. Doctors fought to stabilize her, but her injuries were too extensive. Around midday, Katya died, just days before her 21st birthday. The celebration she had planned with her family was erased in minutes by an act of cruelty. The crime was captured on video. The footage quickly went viral, provoking outrage throughout Paraguay. The images showed the viciousness of the assault and the driver's clear intent to flee. Katya's body was later transferred to the judicial morgue for autopsy. The preliminary report concluded that she died of hypovolemic shock, her organs shutting down from massive internal bleeding caused by multiple traumatic injuries. Her father, devastated, told reporters that nothing could bring his daughter back. His only plea was for justice. Investigators soon pieced together the events of that morning. Evidence showed Osvaldo had been parked outside her home, likely waiting to confront or intimidate her. When he saw Katya returning, believing she was with another man, his jealousy erupted into violence. That same day, Osvaldo was arrested and taken to the 17th Central Police Station. Prosecutors wasted no time in charging him with femicide, a crime in Paraguay that carries a maximum sentence of 30 years. During his preliminary hearing, Osvaldo chose to remain silent, refusing to provide any explanation for what had happened. As the investigation advanced, a darker side of his past emerged. Records revealed that earlier in 2023, another woman, Lori Martinez, had filed a complaint against him for a serious fraud scheme. Lori testified that Osvaldo had stolen her Instagram account, which had more than 100,000 followers, and then used it to carry out scams. Not long after Casia's death, one of Osvaldo's former girlfriends broke her silence, choosing to remain anonymous out of fear of retaliation. She explained that she had been in a relationship with him for 2 years. At first, everything seemed normal, but when the global health crisis struck, his darker side emerged. She described him as impulsive, manipulative, and deceitful, someone who not only lied to those around him, but also displayed violent tendencies even after their breakup. The harassment didn't stop. She recalled being so afraid of him that she avoided leaving her home. Eventually, her relatives abroad encouraged her to move in with them, and that was how she finally escaped his control. But even then, Osvaldo continued sending her messages. Despite already being in a relationship with Katya, she also remembered how he often disguised aggression as jokes, and on more than one occasion, hit her and smashed her cell phone during arguments. Another victim was the owner of the car used in the attack. Early reports suggested that the vehicle had been lent to Osvaldo by a friend, but the truth was different. The car's owner later clarified that they were not friends at all, only former classmates. According to his testimony, Osvaldo had stolen the car during a gathering. He had asked for the keys, claiming he needed to retrieve something from inside, and then disappeared. The owner didn't initially suspect foul play, but the following morning, when the car was still missing, he became desperate. Soon after, Osvaldo's father called him, revealing what had happened to Katia. Rushing to the scene, the owner was horrified to find his vehicle completely destroyed and implicated in such a brutal crime. These testimonies painted a clearer picture of Osvaldo, a manipulative, violent, and utterly reckless individual with no respect for laws or boundaries. On August 29, 2023, just 2 days after the attack, family and friends gathered in Lambaret to bid farewell to Katia. Her funeral was heartbreaking. Amid the grief and mourning, those present raised their voices against gender-based violence, demanding urgent reforms and stronger action from the state to protect women. Even with key evidence like the viral video showing the deliberate assault, the investigation pressed forward. In January 2024, authorities carried out an official reconstruction of the events. The purpose was to piece together the timeline with precision, retracing the actions that had unfolded that night and strengthening the case against Osvaldo. During this procedure, witnesses described the tragedy. Elias Ferrer, the friend who had driven Katia home, gave his account once again. He pointed out exactly where he had stopped his car, where Katia stepped out, and where the color Perla Toyota Allion, driven by Osvaldo, had been waiting. It was here, in the narrow street outside her home, that the ambush began. Prosecutors explained that the way Osvaldo had positioned his car was no coincidence. By blocking the entrance, he ensured that no driver could drop Katia directly at her gate. She would be forced to walk, and in those few exposed steps, he could carry out his revenge. The reconstruction of the crime not only clarified the sequence of events, but also highlighted the premeditation and hatred that fueled his actions. As the case advanced toward trial, problems surfaced. During one of the preliminary hearings, the prosecution discovered significant errors in the official documents. Left uncorrected, these irregularities could jeopardize the entire process. Among the mistakes were altered charges, the wrong name of the prosecutor originally assigned to the case, and even a description of events taken from an unrelated case. The court attributed these issues to technical failures. A power outage, they explained, had caused the system to reload an old Grady RANINDISO, unedited template, leading to the errors. To prevent the defense from exploiting these mistakes to request a mistrial, the court postponed the hearing and ordered the documents corrected. Finally, on October 15, 2024, the trial began in the sentencing court of San Lorenzo. At 8 o'clock a.m., the trial of Osvaldo Zaracho Fernandez officially began. Now, Osvaldo asked to make a statement. He admitted to the crime and turned to Katia's family to beg for forgiveness, claiming he had acted in a moment of madness. But despite his confession, the trial proceeded, evidence was presented, and witnesses gave their accounts. The courtroom listened as a detailed autopsy report was read aloud. The findings were devastating. Katia had suffered multiple fractures, both arms, one leg, her ribs, her thorax, and severe injuries to her skull. One of the most fatal blows came when the car struck her abdomen, causing massive internal bleeding. Her heart no longer had blood to pump, and her organs collapsed. These injuries confirmed beyond doubt that her death was the result of brutal polytrauma. The evidence aligned with the prosecution's theory of premeditation and violence. In her closing arguments, the lead prosecutor declared that the accusations had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. She demanded the maximum penalty, 30 years in prison, plus an additional 5 years as a security measure. Along with psychiatric rehabilitation for Osvaldo, the court largely upheld her request. Osvaldo was sentenced to 30 years in prison, the harshest penalty available under Paraguayan law. While the additional 5 years for security reasons were not granted, the conviction closed a painful chapter for the Brites family. Outside the courthouse, Albino expressed his feelings. He was satisfied that the court had imposed the maximum sentence, but he made it clear that he would never forgive Osvaldo. No verdict, no prison term, could erase the loss of his daughter or heal the permanent wound inflicted on his family. Women's rights organizations across Paraguay seized on the case as a rallying cry. They pointed out the structural failures that had left Katia vulnerable. She had done everything right. She filed complaints, she went to the police, and she provided evidence to prosecutors. She placed her trust in the justice system. Yet, at every stage, the institutions failed her. Activists stressed that Katia was not what is often called a silent victim. She spoke up, demanded protection, and fought for her right to live. But her voice was ignored until it was too late. Katia's case became another tragic example of inefficiency and indifference within a system that continues to underestimate the severity of gender-based violence and its devastating consequences. Even the authorities eventually admitted that mistakes had been made. Rather than focusing on blame, officials stressed the need to find solutions to ensure such failures would never happen again. The National Police Commander announced the opening of an internal investigation to determine whether negligence had occurred in monitoring Osvaldo's house arrest. He added that if irregularities were confirmed, disciplinary action would be taken against the officers responsible. The case sent shockwaves across Paraguayan society. It sparked a national debate about gender violence and the systemic failures of justice. Lawmakers responded by introducing a bill to declare a state of social emergency regarding violence against women, girls, and adolescents. The initiative aimed to establish urgent prevention mechanisms, including workshops and awareness campaigns to promote gender equality and demand stronger state action. Another critical proposal emerged from the outrage: the introduction of electronic ankle monitors for individuals placed under house arrest. The idea was simple: prevent cases like Osvaldo, where an abuser could easily violate restrictions without detection. Progress was slow, but steps were taken. On June 13, 2024, officials announced that within 2 months, the bidding process for the devices would begin, alongside the creation of a monitoring center staffed by representatives from the prosecutor's office, the police, and the judiciary. By November 25, the government launched the pilot program in Asunción, outfitting 100 individuals under house arrest with electronic bracelets. Authorities described it as a first step, with plans to expand the program throughout the country once the system had been tested and adjusted. For human rights and women's rights organizations, Katia's case became far more than just another statistic. It turned into a painful symbol of what unchecked violence can destroy, and a rallying cry for urgent reform. Her death exposed not only the cruelty of one individual, but also the profound weaknesses of the institutions that were supposed to protect her. In the end, Katia's name stands as both a reminder of the deep wounds inflicted by gender-based violence and as a call to transform a system that had, for too long, failed the very people who need it most. On October 9, 1999, a man walking near a ravine just outside Toronto stopped in horror. Scattered on the ground were bones, teeth, and strands of dark hair. Coyotes had dragged the remains through the brush, but it was clear these belonged to a child. The victim was soon identified as 15-year-old Sharmini Anandaval, who had been missing for 4 months. She had left home one summer morning, excited about her first job, one she believed had been arranged by a neighbor she trusted, a man who claimed to be a police officer. Instead, he had lured her into a trap. What followed stunned the city: a broken promise, a predator hiding in plain sight, and a family forced to spend decades seeking answers. But who was this man, and how did he manage to fool an entire community for so long? Stay with us until the very end of this video, as we uncover the shocking truth behind the murder of Sharmini Anandavel. Don Mills began as a middle-class Toronto neighborhood, but by the early 1992s had become home to many immigrants. The Anandavel family, father, mother, 2 sons and a daughter, arrived from Sri Lanka in 1994 during the Civil War and settled in Don Mills. They quickly made friends with their neighbors and felt they were safe. But that was not the case. On the morning of June 12, 1999, 15 years old, Sharmini woke early to prepare for her first job. She attended school across the street from their high-rise and, having finished 9th grade, felt a little grown up. She didn't want to work long-term. She mainly wanted to earn money for a pair of new shoes. Her parents were also happy that she could earn some extra money. The job itself seemed simple. Sharmini had not been asked to answer phones or do anything risky. Her parents knew she got the job through a neighbor, Stanley Tippett. All the residents knew Stanley, a young man who worked as a security guard in the building. He usually works at night, walking the apartment corridors, asking after and watching over the residents' community, even though he doesn't accept payment and works voluntarily at about 9 a.m. On June 12, Sharmini left for work. Her younger brother accompanied her to the elevator, teasing her about her clothes being too dirty. They said goodbye, expecting she would be home in time for dinner to tell them about the day. Evening came, however, and Sharmini did not return. Worse, her parents had no idea where she worked and could not contact the office. They also remembered she planned to visit a shopping center that day to return a pair of earrings she no longer wanted. As night fell and there was still no sign of her, their worry deepened. They went to see Stanley, hoping he could provide the address or phone number where Sharmini worked. Stanley's apartment was on the floor below theirs. When they knocked, no one answered. The door was unlocked. So they entered, and were shocked. The apartment was empty. No bed, no closet, not even a table or chairs. All the furniture was gone. The sight horrified them. Sharmini's parents reported her missing to the police. The officers arrived at the building, listened to their stories, and were informed of Stanley's empty apartment. Initially, some officers assumed that Sharmini had run away from home, as young girls sometimes do, perhaps with a boyfriend. Sharmini's parents dismissed the idea, as she was well-behaved and had no reason to run away from home. Detectives searched Sharmini's room carefully. Her belongings were in place. If she had run away, she likely would have taken something valuable. The only missing items were the clothes she had worn that morning. On her desk, officers found an important detail: an employment form. The application was for a unit described as a police search team that operated in the subway. The officers were surprised because they did not know the unit. When they examined the application, they found several suspicious points. First, Sharmini had not told her family that she would be working for a police unit. Second, the form only asked for her name, date of birth, and address. There were no requirements for experience, references, or social security number. Third, the application was printed on regular printer paper, without any logos, copyrights, or official seals, and even contained spelling errors. Taken together, these factors led the police to question the form's authenticity. While the paper did not prove a connection between Sharmini's alleged new job and her disappearance, the officers considered the application suspicious. In the days after Sharmini disappeared, police questioned her family, teachers and friends. Everyone who knew her described her as decent, cheerful and hardworking, and also courageous in a positive way. She was wary of strangers and not easily disturbed. One classmate said he saw Sharmini on June 12 at 10:30 a.m., sitting on a bench near a local shopping center. Another classmate said he met her at 11:45 a.m. in the square by the shopping center. It soon emerged that Sharmini had lied to her parents, She told them she was going to an office job and would be available by phone all day. In fact, she told her friends that she was working for the police in the banned substance unit and was going undercover to help arrest banned substance dealers. Many friends were surprised she had been hired by the police so quickly. Most classmates earned extra money delivering newspapers or handing out leaflets. After learning this, the police stopped treating Sharmini's disappearance as a voluntary runaway. A large search began, involving dozens of officers and volunteers. Investigators focused on a man named Stanley Tippett. Born in Toronto, Stanley and his two brothers were raised by their mother in a one-room government apartment and grew up with little money. From birth, Stanley had Treacher-Collins syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that affects development of the facial bones and tissues. He had facial deformities, small ears and slanted eyes, needed special schooling, and attended a school for children with disabilities. He had hearing problems and was often bullied. On one occasion, his mother called the police when neighbors attacked him. By 1999, Stanley had grown up, married and had a son. The family lived in a Don Mills apartment building and got along with neighbors. Stanley sometimes took local children to the pool, swam with them and walked them home. He even taught some judo. He told neighbors he worked for the police, wore a uniform, and carried an ID. He also claimed his appearance had been damaged in a bomb disposal accident. People believed him and felt sorry for him. In reality, Stanley was not a police officer. After Sharmini's disappearance, neighbors learned this and were alarmed. Police discovered Stanley had a criminal record. In 1991, at 16, he stole keys to a school classroom, broke in after hours, and set fire to a teacher's desk. In 1997, at 22, he followed a young woman in a deserted park, attacked her from behind, grabbed her waist, put a gun to her head, and ordered her to lie down. Panicking, the woman lied that she was on her period. Stanley released her. She reported the incident to police, and Stanley convinced a judge he had intended only to rob her. He was convicted of attempted robbery in 1997 and received a suspended sentence. In 1998, he falsely identified himself to officers and confiscated bicycles from neighborhood teens. A month later, he was detained after trying to make an arrest himself. When Sharmini vanished in 1999, detectives saw Stanley as a prime suspect. They learned he and his family had moved out of the house next to Sharmini's family 2 weeks before her disappearance, relocating to an apartment about a 2-hour drive away. The police tracked him down quickly and he came in for questioning. Stanley told an odd tale. He admitted giving Sharmini a job application, but the form did not mention police work. He said he saw Sharmini worried about not finding a part-time job. So he decided to help and gave her an application for a pool position. Stanley said that on the morning of June 12, he arrived in the Don Mills area. He worked as a landscaper and was supposed to mow a lawn, but his car broke down in the parking lot of the shopping center where Sharmini was last seen. Investigators checked with the jewelry department where Sharmini was reportedly supposed to return a pair of earrings, and the staff confirmed she had not returned them. Stanley denied seeing Sharmini that day. He said he fixed the car, went to work, mowed for several hours, and then went home. During questioning, Stanley described parts of his day in great detail, especially his mowing routine, including coffee breaks and minute-by-minute accounts of his work. He was inexplicably vague, however, about the time he spent in the shopping center parking lot. Police released him but kept him under surveillance. In the 1,990 seconds, Toronto saw a rise in crimes by Tamil gangs, and dedicated police units tracked suspected members. Detectives investigating Sharmini's disappearance found no link to those gangs, but they continued to watch Stanley. A week after the interview, Stanley sold his car to a junkyard for only $10, even though he had recently installed a $1,000 engine. Officers located the vehicle as it was being prepped for dismantling and searched it thoroughly. The cabin was clean and yielded no evidence. They did notice the trunk's interior trim had been recently removed and could not be found. After that search, The investigation stalled. 4 months passed with no progress. On the morning of October 9, a local man walking in woods east of Toronto, about a 10-minute drive from Sharmini's home, spotted something in a ravine. Approaching it, he discovered human remains and rushed home to call the police. Due to hot weather and partial flooding, only hair, bones, and teeth remained. Coyotes had scattered the bones over a wide area. Police collected all recoverable remains. The victim was identified as Sharmini Anandavel. She had been murdered. No perpetrator DNA was found. Detectives continued to follow Stanley, but the case again went cold. Months turned into years. The investigation into Sharmini's death was never solved and the file grew cold. Her parents suspected Stanley's involvement, but there was no evidence to charge him, and they felt powerless as they waited for him to slip up. 2 years later, Stanley and his family moved to Collingwood. By then, he had 2 more daughters. Soon after moving, he began stalking a 25-year-old neighbor who was raising her son alone. She rejected his advances, but he persisted, sitting in his red van for hours, watching her windows. Stanley also filed a complaint with the Canadian Society for the Protection of Children, accusing the woman of abusing her child. The neighbor called the police, and in 2004, Stanley was charged with slander. He was convicted and given a suspended sentence. After that incident, Stanley's family moved again, this time to Peterborough, where the police again became interested in him because of his past. After a few months, Stanley was detained after offering a local woman a fake job. The woman realized she was being deceived and reported him to the police, but no punishment followed. 2 months later, a new incident happened in the Colmar parking lot. Stanley met a young woman who wanted a job at that supermarket. Through the conversation, he learned her name, address and date of birth. Promising to help her find a job, he offered her a position at a youth volunteer organization and began following her after learning her home address. Stanley went to her house, peered through the windows, left gifts by the door, and one day slipped a birthday card into her mailbox, signed Jason. He later met her in a cafe, spoke about the volunteer organization, handed her a blank application form and asked her to fill it out. He also said she would need to resolve some issues with the police. The woman listened, but then said that she had a job at a fast food restaurant. Stanley became angry. The woman apologized and said she needed to go to the restroom. When she reached a quiet, safe place, she called the organization Stanley had named. The staff told her they had no vacancies and no employee named Jason. She then called the police. Officers came to the cafe and spoke with Stanley. Because he was already under police scrutiny, they took his car keys and inspected the vehicle. In the red van, the officers found a kit that included kidnapping tape, rope, bags, and plastic zip ties under the driver's seat. They later found a knife. Detectives searched his house and found an air pistol in the basement. Stanley was arrested and charged with stalking. The court found him guilty and sentenced him to 2 years in prison. But prison did not reform Stanley. After his release in 2006, he began visiting the grounds of a secondary school, followed students, and frightened them. He was soon banned from the property. A couple of months later, he returned and again broke the law. Early on August 6, 2008, eyewitnesses called police after hearing screams from the nearby woods. A girl was shouting, "Please stop. Don't do this." When officers arrived, an unfamiliar man with a strange appearance ran out of the forest, got into a van, ignored orders to stop, and sped away. Officers chased him long enough to read the license plate. It belonged to Stanley's van. They did not pursue at high speed through the city, fearing a greater danger. The chase ended in the forest, where officers found a young, intoxicated girl in torn clothes. She said she had spent the night at a friend's birthday party. Early that morning, the girls were walking home when a man in a red van offered them a ride. They agreed. He dropped one girl off at her house, but took the other into the forest and attacked her. While officers collected evidence and questioned the victim, Stanley called the police and claimed he had been robbed. He said he had picked up the girls, dropped one off, and was driving to the second address when two unknown men flashed their lights and forced him from the driver's seat, stealing the van and the girl. He said the van had been found later that evening, parked and empty. 2 used condoms were recovered from the van, but neither yielded identifiable DNA. Investigators found traces of semen from 2 different men on the victim's clothing. The quantity was small, and forensic experts could not identify Stanley's DNA from it. He denied guilt, insisting that bandits had stolen his van and later assaulted the girl, leaving different DNA on her t-shirt. At trial, experts suggested the sperm on the clothing could have been deposited earlier, perhaps during laundering, and not during the attack. Still, police had seen a man with Stanley's distinctive appearance driving the red van out of the woods, and the victim identified him. In December 2009, the court convicted Stanley of 7 charges, including assault, kidnapping, harassment, and violent offenses. He was sentenced to life in prison. In 2011, he was added to the list of especially dangerous offenders, which greatly reduced his chances of parole. After Stanley was jailed, Toronto police reopened the unsolved murder investigation of Sharmini Anandaville. Detectives hoped to find new evidence and finally solve the long-forgotten case. Investigators discovered that Sharmini's job application had been printed on thermal paper, the same heat-sensitive paper used for cash receipts and ATM slips. Thermal paper darkens when heated and is difficult to lift fingerprints from. The application had been stored improperly for years, which complicated fingerprint recovery. But traces connected to Stanley were later sought. By the end of 2010, Stanley denied ever giving Sharmini a job application for work at the pool. Investigator Matt Crone, who led the Sharmini case, was convinced Stanley was responsible for her death. Matt believed Sharmini trusted Stanley because he had told her he could place her in an undercover police role and asked her to keep it secret. According to the investigator, Stanley allegedly took Sharmini into the woods, gave her instructions, and had her wait while an undercover operation to catch banned substance dealers supposedly took place. Matt alleges Stanley then returned and carried out the fatal attack. For more than 25 years, Stanley has not fully disclosed his version of events and often refuses to speak about Sharmini or even use her name. On rare occasions, he has told reporters that Sharmini was obsessed with married men and stalked him, a trait he claimed she inherited from her mother. Stanley has also given inconsistent explanations about the job application. He said he wanted a job at Walmart and, after encountering Sharmini in a parking lot and later in a cafe, deliberately misled her so that Walmart would hire him instead. He admitted he became angry and yelled at her when he feared she might expose his deception to his family. Items found in Stanley's van, including tape, rope, bags, plastic ties, a hammer and a knife, were "Ezid Bader," he said, ordinary tools anyone might have. He claimed, for example, that plastic ties were used to secure portable TVs for his children on long trips. Regarding the attack in the woods, he has at times expressed regret about giving rides and trying to help women he picked up on the road, but he continues to plead not guilty. Stanley maintains that his willingness to help others led to him being used and deceived. At trial, a psychiatrist described Stanley as impulsive and thrill-seeking, with traits of duplicity and narcissism, and concluded he would pose a danger if released. In 2018, he was denied parole. He continues to pursue appeals. While incarcerated, Stanley has been attacked by fellow inmates on multiple occasions. Sharmini's family moved away from the city where the tragedy occurred. Her brothers are now in their 40s and have their own families. Each year, on June 12, they gather at their parents' home, review photographs, and mourn the loss of their beloved Sharmini. On March 17, 2020, bridge inspectors in Florida stumbled upon a suitcase hidden beneath the Escambia Bay Bridge. Inside was the decomposed body of an 11-year-old boy, wrapped in blankets, still wearing the clothes he died in. The boy was Gannon Stauch, who had disappeared from his Colorado home nearly 2 months earlier. His disappearance had prompted frantic searches and prayers for his safe return. What investigators discovered, however, was far worse than anyone had feared. Gannon had not run away or been abducted by a stranger. Evidence soon pointed to his own household, to the person who should have protected him, his stepmother, Leticia Stauch. She had publicly pleaded for his return, even as she allegedly knew where he was and what had happened. This is the disturbing account of betrayal and violence, how a trusted caregiver became the accused killer, and how Gannon Stauch's death reverberated across the country. Albert Stauch met Leticia Stauch in 2014. During one of the hardest times in his life, he was in the middle of a painful divorce from his first wife, Landon. They have 2 young children together, Gannon, born in 2009, and Layla, born in 2012. Both Albert and Landon had struggled with infidelity, and as their marriage fell apart, Albert sought comfort and companionship elsewhere. Leticia had previously been married to a man named Hunt and had a daughter, Harley. From that relationship, she worked as an elementary school teacher, specializing in special needs, and had recently moved from South Carolina to Colorado. Behind her was a complicated history, including a criminal record spanning more than 2 decades. Her first known felony was in 2001 for stealing a car. Though her deceptive behavior had begun earlier, she had made a fake bomb threat in high school. When Albert and Leticia began dating, she presented herself as a devout Christian who shared his values. Albert, a full-time member of the Army National Guard, was drawn to her apparent faith, her work with children, and the stable image she projected. She portrayed herself as the ideal stepmother, loving, supportive, and ready to care for his kids as her own. She also seemed understanding of his military lifestyle. With its relocations and deployments, to outsiders, they looked like a couple, rebuilding their lives, hopeful about creating a blended family. However, there were red flags that later stood out to investigators. Leticia's past was more troubling than she initially revealed. In South Carolina, she lost a teaching job and had her educator's certificate suspended after abandoning her position without proper notice. She claimed harassment and retaliation, alleging the district superintendent's niece was her husband's ex-wife. But these claims were never substantiated. Sources reported she had been fired from her 3 most recent teaching jobs, suggesting ongoing workplace conflicts and instability. Despite knowing her for less than a year, Albert proposed. In January 2015, just over a year after Leticia divorced her first husband, they married, hoping for a fresh start for themselves and their children. Initially, Gannon and Layla primarily lived with their mother, Landon, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Leticia worked to establish her role in their lives, while the children split time between households for holidays and summers, an arrangement that added stress for everyone. During this period, Landon remarried a man named Mike Hayat and became pregnant with her 3rd child, a daughter she would name Nova. Over time, Albert became increasingly concerned about the safety of his children at the Landon home. He feared that banned substances might be present, concerns he associated with Mike's behavior and lifestyle. Wanting the children closer, and in what he believed to be a safer environment, Albert pursued increased custody. Leticia seemed supportive and eager to take on a larger role with Gannon and Layla. However, the family faced extra strain due to frequent relocations caused by Albert's military assignments. Leticia also wanted a lifestyle beyond their financial means, which created serious conflicts between her and Albert. Over time, she became increasingly frustrated with the constant moving and the responsibilities of caring for Albert's children. What investigators later uncovered was that Leticia's feelings about being a stepmother were far more conflicted than she appeared to show. In public, she acted like a caring stepmother, but evidence suggested she resented her stepchildren, especially Gannon, and had come to view him as a burden. despite previously claiming to love him like her own. On January 27, 2020, just before 7:00 p.m., the El Paso County Sheriff's Office received a call about a missing child from the 6600 block of Mandan Drive in the Lorson Ranch neighborhood of Colorado Springs. The caller, Leticia Stauch, reported that 11 years old Gannon had not returned from visiting a friend. Leticia told the dispatcher that Gannon left between 3:15 a.m. and 4 to walk to a friend's house but never came back. She added that Gannon's father, Albert, was in Oklahoma for military training, leaving her with the responsibility of caring for Gannon and Lila. Gannon was initially classified as a runaway. At 7:32 p.m., he was listed in state and national databases. With that status, when Leticia was directed to call the non-emergency line to provide more details, investigators immediately noticed troubling inconsistencies in her account. She couldn't name any of Gannon's friends or their parents, nor could she say where they lived. For seasoned officers familiar with missing child cases, this was a major red flag. Around 10:00 p.m. that night, police from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office arrived at Leticia's home. She presented herself as a worried stepmother, but her behavior seemed off. She seemed more focused on controlling the story than on urgently searching for Gannon. Her confusion increased as she struggled to maintain her story in the face of questioning from experienced investigators. The next day, January 28, 2020, at 12:29 p.m., the case was transferred to detectives with the sheriff's office. They began interviews, gathered surveillance footage, and followed up on leads. Friends and family who knew Gannon well pushed back against the runaway label, insisting he wasn't the type to leave without permission. As detective dug deeper, Leticia's account didn't match what they learned about Gannon's character and routine. By January 30, 2020, just 3 days later, the case was upgraded to a missing and endangered child, indicating serious concern about what had happened to Gannon. The sheriff's office requested support from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. The move reflected the seriousness of the case and the growing suspicion that this was more than just a runaway. On January 31, 2020, Leticia spoke exclusively with local reporter Spencer Wilson, portraying herself as a devastated stepmother desperate to find Gannon. To outsiders, she might have seemed sincere, but investigators were increasingly suspicious due to her behavior and shifting story. A critical breakthrough came on February 3, 2020, when a neighbor provided home surveillance footage. The video showed 2 people getting into a truck on the day Gannon disappeared, but only one person returned. This directly contradicted Leticia's claims and gave investigators a crucial timeline to build their case. The surveillance footage showed Leticia and Gannon leaving their home around 10:15 a.m. On January 27, when the camera captured the return at about 2:19 p.m., only Leticia came back. This contradicting evidence severely undermined her story and shifted the direction of the investigation. Investigators now had confirmation that Leticia was the last person to see Gannon alive, and that her account of his disappearance was false. What followed was one of the largest missing child searches in Colorado history. Thousands of investigative hours were logged, and hundreds of tips poured in from the community. Multiple agencies joined the effort: the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Colorado Springs Police Department, and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Search teams deployed drones, dogs, horses, helicopters, and divers across numerous locations in and around Colorado Springs. The community rallied. Volunteers devoted countless hours, and Gannon's biological parents, Albert and Landon, made emotional public appeals for his safe return and thanked the community for its support. Throughout this period, Leticia kept up a deceptive front. She even participated in some searches while knowing what had happened to Gannon. She gave local media interviews, portraying herself as a concerned stepmother. Meanwhile, Investigators documented every inconsistency in her statements and behavior. As the case progressed, her story changed repeatedly, each version more elaborate and implausible than the last. On February 2, 2020, she told Albert that a man had broken into their home, assaulted her, and abducted Gannon. When Albert asked why there were no signs of a struggle, she claimed she had cleaned up because she was scared. Her fabricated account grew increasingly detailed. She said the attacker's name was Eduardo and described the supposed assault and kidnapping at length. She told investigators she cleaned the scene before reporting Gannon missing. Attempting to explain away the lack of physical evidence, seasoned investigators recognized clear signs of deception. Letitia arrived at interviews with prepared notes and seemed intent on controlling the narrative rather than providing helpful information. During one interview, she stuffed tissues into her pants and claimed to have breathing and heart problems, prompting a hospital visit. After being medically cleared, she left the building without notifying law enforcement, further heightening suspicion. A review of her digital activity uncovered troubling evidence at odds with her public persona. Her internet history included searches on when a body starts to decompose, how to cheat a lie detector, and most disturbingly, that she hated her husband's stepson. Intelligence analyst Kevin Clark testified about her phone usage on January 27. Normally, Letitia used her phone frequently, but that day, there were significant gaps with no activity, precisely during the time she claimed to be out with Gannon at a pet store, and when they returned home. This digital silence aligned with the period investigators later identified as the likely window of the crime. Altogether, these findings revealed deep resentment toward Gannon and suggested deliberate planning behind her actions. On March 2, 2020, after weeks of investigation and growing evidence, Letitia was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She faces charges including first-degree murder of a child by a person in a position of trust, child abuse, resulting in death, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. Investigators had gathered enough evidence to establish probable cause in Gannon's disappearance and presumed death. During her extradition to Colorado, Letitia allegedly attacked a deputy, an incident that made national headlines and was cited as evidence of violent behavior. After Letitia's arrest, Albert filed for divorce, claiming the marriage had broken down irretrievably. He noted in court documents that Letitia was in South Carolina, awaiting extradition to Colorado on the murder charge involving his son. On March 17, 2020, Florida Department of Transportation bridge inspectors discovered a suitcase under the Escambia Bay Bridge in Pace, Florida. During routine work, inside, they found what appeared to be a boy's body wrapped in blankets, far from Gannon's Colorado home. The remains were severely decomposed, and the location had no apparent connection to Gannon or his family. The suitcase's placement suggested a deliberate effort to hide evidence. On March 20, 2020, authorities confirmed the remains were those of Gannon Stouch, bringing the search to a tragic end. The discovery, hundreds of miles from home, raised new questions about how the body was transported and the planning involved. When Dr. Susan Ignacio, a medical examiner in Largo, Florida, performed an autopsy on Gannon on March 18, 2020, the full extent of Letitia's brutality toward the innocent child finally became clear. The autopsy revealed a harrowing picture of violence and suffering that shocked even seasoned investigators and prosecutors. Gannon suffered 18 sharp-edged wounds, indicating that he had been stabbed multiple times with a knife or similar weapon. There were also 4 blunt force injuries to the head, indicating that he had been beaten with an object. The most tragic part was that Gannon, 11, had been shot with a shotgun. The bullet had penetrated her lower jaw and severed her spinal cord. The medical examiner concluded the injuries were intentional and aimed at the head, chest, and upper body, indicating an intent to kill. Some wounds appeared defensive, suggesting Gannon tried to fight back. The autopsy also found that Gannon had been given hydrocodone before the attack, The prescription drug belonged to Albert and was used to treat his finger injuries, and it is unusual for a controlled substance to be found in Gannon's system. This suggests that Letitia may have given him drugs to weaken him or facilitate the attack. Gannon's body had decomposed significantly. He was still wearing the clothes he died in, wrapped in his bed sheets, and placed in the suitcase. With the body recovered and the autopsy complete, investigators concluded that Letitia killed Gannon in his bedroom, moved his body to multiple locations, and eventually transported him to Florida in an attempt to conceal the crime. Digital evidence from Letitia's phones showed how much she planned and deceived others. She searched for information about fake polygraph tests, purchased a counterfeit polygraph exam online, and later told Albert she had passed the test to maintain an appearance of innocence. Phone records also tied her to calls made from Gannon's phone after he was dead, including a call to his mother at 10:03 p.m., the night he was reported missing, by which time investigators say Gannon was already deceased. Investigators found that Letitia rented cars and made multiple trips, including at least one trip to dispose of evidence and move Gannon's body. Analysis of her movements revealed that when she drove to the airport to pick up Albert after his return from Oklahoma, Gannon's body was in the back of her vehicle, underscoring the extent of her deception. After years of legal proceedings and competency evaluations, Letitia Stouch's trial began in March 2023. She pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming she suffered from dissociative identity disorder due to childhood abuse, and accused Albert of involvement in Gannon's death. Charges the court found unfounded. The prosecution presented extensive evidence, including testimony from investigators, forensic experts, and Albert. Albert emotionally recounted his final moments with his son, telling the jury that he held his son and told him he loved him before leaving for the army. The defense called psychiatrist Dorothy Outnow-Lewis, who testified that Letitia suffered a major psychotic break linked to childhood trauma. Despite that testimony, the evidence of planning and attempts to cover up the crime indicated Letitia understood and intentionally concealed her actions. On May 8, 2023, after nearly 8 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected her insanity defense and found her guilty on all counts. Before sentencing, Gannon's parents delivered powerful victim impact statements. Gannon's mother, London, said that she prayed they would never have to look at Letitia's face again. Albert asked the judge to remove Letitia's last name so that she would no longer be associated with their family. Judge Gregory Werner told Letitia that he could say without hesitation that the facts in the case were the most horrific he had ever seen, and that her conduct in the case warranted the maximum penalty he could impose under Colorado law. Letitia Stouch received life in prison without parole on 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus an additional 13. 5 years for tampering with evidence and a dead body. The case of Gannon Stouch is a tragic reminder that harm can come from those who appear trustworthy. 11-year-old Gannon, who loved video games, basketball, and family time, that was robbed of his future by someone who was supposed to care for him.